Chapter 855. Outside the battleground of the Lu clan, the radiance of the matrix was still flowing, but the surroundings were quiet, so quiet that it made people panic. Qi Yuanli led his men to approach the battleground carefully. It was not that he was afraid, but the scene before him was too strange. It was clearly a battle between two parties, but there was a different kind of fluctuation coming from it. In the end, even the slightest aura disappeared. Qi Yuanli had never seen such a strange thing. Even if both parties perished together, there should be at least one or two left, right? It was impossible that not even one was left alive. Qi Yuanli hesitated for a long time before approaching the battleground with his men, wanting to see what was going on. After entering the matrix, the expressions of all the warriors from Wind-Sweeping Tower suddenly changed. As far as the eye could see, everything was blood red. Corpses were everywhere. The entire area covered by the matrix was completely soaked in blood. Countless corpses were lying on the ground, and one could clearly see that some of the corpses had been completely sucked dry, like dried corpses. In the end, they even found the corpses of the Sun clan and the Lu clan's patriarch. One was killed by a sword through the heart, and the other had his head smashed by a punch. If not for the relics on his body, Wind-Sweeping Tower wouldn't even be able to recognize him. Qi Yuanli and his men looked at each other. There was only one thought in their minds: something big had happened. The Sun family and the Lu family had a huge battle, but in the end both sides were completely wiped out. Moreover, the ancestors of both sides were definitely not killed by each other. Could there be a third party involved? Who was it that could kill two true fire spirit refinement realm cultivators? Such a big matter was no longer something that Qi Yuanli could intervene in. He immediately went back to inform the leader of Wind-Sweeping Tower, Fang Fifan, and also informed the Shangshuaying clan. In theory, the Shangshuaying clan was the leader of the 9 superclans, but in reality, the Shangshuaying clan rarely meddled in other people's affairs. The fight between the 9 superclans had nothing to do with them, as long as the 9 superclans did not affect the Shangshuaying clan. As the saying went, the 9 superclans were like water, and the Shangshuaying clan was like iron. The Shangshuaying clan could not be bothered with what happened to the others. However, the commotion this time was so huge that the Shangshuaying clan sent Sanshu over to investigate what was going on. On the morning of the third day, Sanshu brought Bailu to the battlefield of the Lu clan. As the future successor of the Shangshuaying clan, Bailu would have to deal with this mess sooner or later. It would be good for him to familiarize himself with it in advance. Fang Fifan didn't expect that the clan of Shangshui would send the number 1 on the wind cloud list. He hurriedly walked over and cupped his hands. So it's third mastering who has come in person. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Sanshu waved his hand and said, "There's no need to be so polite. Tell me, what's the situation?" After Fang Fifan told Sanshu everything that happened that day, Sanshu said indifferently, "In that case, Qi Yuanli didn't see anyone leaving the array formation?" Qi Yuanli smiled bitterly. "My strength is weak. Someone might have left, but I didn't discover it." Sanshu said indifferently, "All right then. Bring me to see the corpse." Everyone stepped into the array formation. At this time, the ground was still littered with corpses. In order to protect the scene, Wind-Sweeping Tower didn't clear away the corpses. They only set up a large-scale ice array in the periphery to prevent the corpses from rotting. Fang Fifan said, "The people of Wind-Sweeping Tower have checked all the corpses. Some of them died in the battle between the Sun clan and the Lu clan, but there were also corpses that died from various kinds of injuries. Some died with sabers, some with swords, and some were directly killed by a powerful force. In any case, there were all kinds of strange things. Most importantly, a large number of the corpses had their qi and blood completely sucked dry. I suspect that it was some kind of evil being or some big shot from the demonic path who had been in closed-door training for a long time that caused such an outcome." Sanshu didn't answer. He just glanced at the corpses of the Lu clan and Sun clan's ancestor. After a while he said, "I can't tell who did it, but I have a feeling that the punch that destroyed the Lu clan's ancestor had the feeling of Qinqing Di." Fang Fifan was stunned. Qinqing Di? But when the accident happened, Qinqing Di was still in West Chu. Sanshu just said indifferently, I only said it had the feeling of Chunqing Di, but I didn't say it was Chunqing Di. Also, that sword strike on the Sun Clan's ancestor's body, I even felt the feeling of Sword King City. But that sword strike should be a sneak attack, and there was a faint bloody aura on it. If the sword was used head-on, it might not be able to hurt the Sun Clan's ancestor. Fang Fifan scratched his head. He was sure that the person who did it wasn't Chunqing Di, and it definitely wasn't the 3 true fire spirit refinement realm cultivators from Sword King City. During this period of time, almost all of them had appeared in their respective territories, and none of them had appeared in Eastern Qi. Bailu, who was standing beside Sanshu, didn't say anything, but he had a feeling that it was extremely familiar. After thinking about it, he couldn't find any clues. So Bailu didn't care anymore. A junior like him didn't have the qualifications to speak here. After saying all this, Sanshu turned around and was about to leave. Fang Fifan was stunned. Master San, are you going to leave just like that? Sanshu said indifferently. What else can I do? Help the Lu clan and Sun clan find the culprit? The Shangshui clan isn't the Guanzhong torture room. People are killed every day in the pugilistic world, and forces are annihilated every year. If we have to care about all of them, wouldn't our clan be too busy? After saying that, Sanshu left indifferently. His attitude was incomparably cold. Qi Yuanli, who was at the side, asked in a low voice. Tower Lord, what should we do next? Fang Fifan snorted lightly. Even the Shangshui clan, the head of the 9 great clans, can't be bothered to care about these things. Of course, our wind-sweeping tower won't. Just spread this news to the pugilistic world. There's no need to say anything, just follow the facts. Wind-sweeping tower was curious about most things. Now that the 2 clans had died for no reason, Fang Fifan felt very uncomfortable. But Fang Fifan also knew that others could continue investigating this matter, but not their wind-sweeping tower. Someone who had the strength to annihilate 2 great clans and kill 2 true fire spirit refinement realm cultivators from the Sun clan, and the Lu clan was definitely someone that wind-sweeping tower couldn't afford to offend. At this time, when this news came out in the pugilistic world, it almost caused an uproar in the pugilistic world. It was just too shocking. The Sun clan and the Lu clan were the 2 great clans that could be ranked in the middle among the 9 great clans. Both of them had experts in the true fire spirit refinement realm guarding them. But in the end, all of them died in one night. This was too shocking. The most shocking thing was that so many people died but no one knew who did it. The other party could annihilate the 2 great clans without a sound. Did that mean that the other party could also annihilate other clans that were weaker than the Sun clan and the Lu clan without a sound? In short, this matter was a little strange. Moreover, the Sun clan from River East did not send all of their members to the Sun clan. Those who stayed behind to guard the Sun clan were also killed by a group of mysterious people. It was enough to show that the other party was targeting the Sun clan and the Lu clan. Some people suspected that this matter was done by the Inma clan. After all, there were people from the Sun clan and the Lu clan among the forces that hit Chu Xiu when he was down. However, if it was done by the Inma clan, they should have been eager to announce it. They would not have kept quiet all this time. Anyway, after this matter, the entire Eastern Qi pugilistic world was in a state of panic. Not to say that everyone was in danger. What people were afraid of was not a certain kind of powerful force. The most terrifying thing was the unknown. At this time, the culprit of this matter did not care about the news of the outside world. At the moment, Chu Xiu was in the Assassins branch of the Blue Dragon Society. After killing the Sun clan's and Lu clan's ancestors, Chu Xiu sensed that there were people from the wind-sweeping tower watching from the side. He immediately left secretly with Yi Xiao to look for Mu Zi and Luo Feiheng. By the time Chu Xiu arrived in Jiangdong, Mu Zi and Luo Feiheng had already taken care of everyone. One had to say that when it came to killing, the Blue Dragon Society was really professional. Although only a few people came, most of the people from the Sun clan were taken care of by the Blue Dragon Society. At this time in the Blue Dragon Society, Luo Feiheng was leaning towards Mu Zi and asked, I say Chu Xiu, you are so strong now. You could even blow the head of the Lu clan's ancestor with one punch. Why are you still hiding? Just reveal your identity and take revenge one by one. Chu Xiu glanced at Luo Feiheng and did not say anything. This woman's motive was not pure. How could a woman who dared to go to a brothel to pick up girls be an ordinary woman? Of course Mu Zi didn't mind. She just felt that this heroic big sister was a bit too enthusiastic. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Haven't you heard of the saying, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to guard against a stab in the dark? The unknown is the scariest. You can obviously set up a trap in the dark, so why reveal your identity and foolishly fight with them?" Luo Feiheng clicked her tongue and said, "Just say that you Chu Xiu are treacherous." After muttering, Luo Feiheng grabbed Mu Zi's arm and didn't let go. His hand unconsciously hugged Mu Zi's waist. Chu Xiu looked at Mu Zi and asked, "Zi, what's the reply from your adoptive father?" Mu Zi said, "Adoptive father said that he is willing to cooperate with young master, but there is only one condition. Butianen can die, but the Blue Dragon Society must be preserved." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course this is not a problem. The only person who has a grudge against me is Butianen. The Blue Dragon Society won't be affected. Moreover, don't forget that I used to be from the Blue Dragon Society. In fact, I still have feelings for the Blue Dragon Society." Mu Zi said, "That's good. Adoptive father said that he will find a chance to discuss with you in detail." Chu Xiu was surprised and said, "Isn't your adoptive father imprisoned in the Blue Dragon Society by Butianen?" Mu Zi said, "He is only imprisoned in the Blue Dragon Society, but adoptive father can still do other things. He has a secret treasure researched by the Black Tortoise School, so he can communicate with you from a distance. However, the fluctuations of the formation are too big, and it will easily attract Butianen's attention. So, we have to wait for a suitable time." Chu Xiu nodded. Once Duan Mu Qianshan looks for him, he would immediately let Mu Zi inform him. During this period of time, Chu Xiu was preparing to go into seclusion. Firstly, he wanted to familiarize himself with his body that had become stronger, and secondly, he wanted to cultivate the cultivation technique he had obtained from the Sun and Lu families, the Black Tortoise True technique. Chapter 856. The Sun family and Lu family were among the 9 great families, and their strength was not weak. This time, the two sides were able to fight to the death not only because of Chu Xiu's provocation, but also because of this secret art. Even a 9-revolution secret art might not be able to make the Sun and Lu families so excited. In Chu Xiu's view, this secret art was definitely a supreme secret art. Moreover, how could a secret art that could be collected and passed down by High Heaven sect be ordinary? This Black Tortoise True art was not a secret art of High Heaven sect, but was instead left behind by an ancient master. That master and the former High Heaven sect's sect master were rivals, but they had a mutual respect for each other. He did not have a disciple, but after a fierce battle, when he was on the verge of death, he chose to pass on his secret art to High Heaven sect. The strength of this Black Tortoise True art lay in the fact that it was not a single secret art, but a collection of 10 secret arts. These 10 secret arts were Peerless Saber Art, Seek the Heaven Spear Art, Heaven's Mandate Sword Way, Great Change Halberd Art, Tiger Roaring Staff Collection, Mountain and Sea Fist Scripture, Black Tortoise Divine Palm, Fierce Kick Technique, Perfect Golden Finger, and Turtle Bone Dragon Claw. This secret art was a combination of 10 martial skills: saber, spear, sword, halberd, fist, palm, leg, claw, and finger. It was simply amazing. Chu Xiu thought that the martial skills he possessed were diverse enough. He cultivated the Tao, Buddhist, and demonic paths, and was proficient in palm techniques, seal techniques, fist techniques, and saber techniques. However, this ancient master had actually combined 10 secret arts into one to form the Black Tortoise True art. It could be said that this master had gone further and stronger than Chu Xiu. Moreover, Chu Xiu could guarantee that the other party had cultivated these 10 martial skills to the extreme, reaching the point of mastery. The reason was simple. If you didn't cultivate one martial Tao to the extreme, how could you fuse it with other martial Tao? This Black Tortoise True technique could be said to be quite in line with Chu Xiu's taste, especially now that Chu Xiu needed to conceal his identity. It would be best if he didn't use those signature martial skills of the past. However, this Black Tortoise True technique forcefully condensed 10 martial skills into one body. It just so happened that in terms of martial skills, it could perfectly conceal Chu Xiu's identity. However, there was still another difficulty in cultivating the black tortoise true technique. And that was the problem of weapons. Some martial skills could only be used with weapons. With the secret space box, it was easy to carry around sabers, spears, swords, and halberds. However, Chu Xiu was too lazy to even use a low-grade divine weapon, let alone a precious weapon. Fortunately, the ancient powerhouse who created the black tortoise true technique seemed to have thought of this problem. Hence, there was also a blueprint for the refinement of weapons in the cultivation method, called the Heavenly War Box. The Heavenly War Box was not a type of weapon. It was a box filled with tiny mechanisms and arrays. When activated, those tiny parts of the mechanisms could instantly form sabers, spears, swords, and halberds. However, the refinement of the Heavenly War Box was too difficult. There couldn't be a single mistake in those tiny parts of the mechanisms. If there was a mistake, the entire Heavenly War Box would immediately collapse. Chu Xiu thought about it. In the current world, there were almost only a handful of people who were qualified to create the Heavenly War Box. Master Blacksmith Mo Yezi was one of them. This time, he still had to trouble Mo Yezi. Moreover, Chu Xiu trusted Mo Yezi enough. This old man had already resigned from his position as the pavilion master of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, but he was still willing to help Luo Feiheng to fight against the Luo clan. It was enough to show that he was closer to Luo Feiheng than to his own son. Therefore, Chu Xiu directly took out the top-grade materials he collected from the Lu clan and the Sun clan, and asked Luo Feiheng to send them to Mo Yezi to help him create the Heavenly War Box. As for the remaining materials, it would be considered as a reward for Master Mo Yezi. In fact, the Mirror Lake Villa had not been doing too well in recent years. Of course, it was compared to when Mo Yezi was the pavilion master of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. When Mo Yezi was the pavilion master of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, he could use almost all the materials in the Divine Weapon Pavilion. But now he was no longer the pavilion master. Although the Mirror Lake Villa also accepted forging requests, it could not be compared to the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Therefore, in recent years, Mo Yezi had forged very few divine weapons. There were only 2 or 3 of them, including Chu Xiu's Heavenly Demon Dance. Therefore, when he saw the unconstrained design of the Heavenly War Box, Mo Yezi was instantly moved. Even if he had to pay for the materials, he was still willing to forge it, not to mention that Chu Xiu had given him a lot of materials. However, Mo Yezi also had some old habits. When he forged a weapon, he first had to look at the person using the weapon. Luo Feiheng said a few words, and Mo Yezi was able to guess Chu Xiu's identity. Although he was shocked, Mo Yezi was not shocked for too long. He lived in the pugilistic world, but he could only be considered as half a member of the pugilistic world. He was not interested in the grudges and benefits of the pugilistic world. From his point of view, these things were not as interesting as the metal in his hands. Therefore, even though he knew, Mo Yezi did not say anything. He immediately turned all his attention to the Heavenly War Box. After everything was arranged, Chu Xiu went into seclusion to cultivate with peace of mind. Yi Xiao was also thrown to the 2 experts of the Heavenly Assassins branch, Han Lei and Song Xiao of the Blue Dragon Society's 4 great blood killers to train. From Chu Xiu's point of view, Yi Xiao's potential was not bad. This potential was not referring to his martial arts potential, but his temperament. Under normal circumstances, he could endure patiently. When it was time to be ruthless, he was not careless. He was worth training. Moreover, Yi Xiao had helped him so much this time, so he was worth training. No matter what, he could be considered half a disciple of his. A month later, in the underground hall of the Heavenly Assassins branch, Han Lei and Song Xiao were looking through some missions. During this period of time, because of Chu Xiu, whether it was Mu Zi or the 2 of them, they all stayed in the Heavenly Assassins branch and rarely went out to carry out missions. Most of the missions were handed over to their subordinates. For example, after Yi Xiao was brought along by Han Lei and Song Xiao to carry out 2 missions, he was thrown aside and went out to carry out missions alone. The Blue Dragon Society's training of assassins had always been very simple. When they sent you to kill someone, and you killed that person, then you would be a good assassin. If you were killed, then you would be trash. It was very simple and crude. Although Yi Xiao was personally thrown over by Chu Xiu, Han Lei and Song Xiao did not hesitate. They trained him as they should. This was because they believed that a piece of trash was not worth Chu Xiu's personal training. In the headquarters of the Heavenly Assassins branch, Han Lei and Song Xiao did not wear masks. Song Xiao was a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance. He always had a smile on his face. When he grinned, there were a few more wrinkles on his brows. He looked like a kind old farmer. No one would believe that such a person was actually the top assassin of the Blue Dragon Society, one of the 4 great blood killers whose hands were stained with blood. At this moment, Song Xiao was mumbling like a chatterbox. Say, do you think the young miss is interested in Chu Xiu? From the looks of it, it seems like she wants to devote her life to him. But this is also good. The young miss has suffered too much these past few years. Such a beautiful woman has been soaking in a storm of blood every day. Not many men can stand it. As for Lord Chu Xiu, he was also born in the Blue Dragon Society. He can't be considered an outsider. To our young miss, he even saved her life. How nice would it be for her to devote her life to him? Song Xiao often laughed, but Han Lei did not cry. He looked slightly younger than Song Xiao, but his face was cold. A knife scar ran from his forehead all the way to his chin. It was as if he had almost been cut in half. Hearing this, Han Lei only said calmly, "Wrong. It's not a prince or a beauty. It's a demon and a female assassin. They are both bloodthirsty." Song Xiao said angrily, "Why are you so insensitive? Who cares what he is? The young miss will have a good husband in the future, won't it? Besides, with such a connection, even if it's not the entire Azure Dragon Society, the second dragon head's bloodline will be in-laws with His Excellency Chu. Wouldn't it be great to have such a powerful backer?" Han Lei wiped his sword and said, "Everything depends on yourself. Don't always think of relying on others." Song Xiao was so angry that he rolled his eyes. The two of them were not on the same wavelength. As he flipped through the mission, he muttered, "I've never worked with you my whole life." At this moment, Mu Zi walked over and said, "Uncle Han, Uncle Song, what are you talking about?" Song Xiao hurriedly shook his head and said, "Nothing, young miss. What's the matter?" Mu Zi's face was full of smiles as she said, "Godfather sent news. I will tell young Master Chu now." As she said this, Mu Zi jogged to find Chu Xiu. Song Xiao turned around and said to Han Lei, "How is it? Didn't I say young miss is interested in official Chu? Since when does young miss have such a happy time? The number of times she smiles in a year can be counted." Han Lei said indifferently, "Love is the most difficult word to understand. Only when you cut the threads of love with your sword do you know how painful it is. You are heartless. Using your eyes to look at young miss is laughable." Song Xiao rolled his eyes a few times. He felt that he had never been angered to death after working with Han Lei for so many years. His will was definitely strong. At this time, Chu Xiu was still in seclusion. He had already grasped the basics of Black Tortoise True technique. The difficulty was actually not too high. Most of the cultivation techniques, such as fist arts, palm arts, and saber arts, Chu Xiu had already dabbled in them, so he was able to learn them very quickly. As for those that Chu Xiu had not come into contact with, he needed to understand and cultivate them properly. Of course, it was easy to grasp the basics, but to completely master them was not something that could be done in a month. So for the rest of the time, Chu Xiu was familiarizing himself with the power of this body. Right now Chu Xiu's realm was very strange. His physical body was already like Chen Qingdi's, reaching the true fire spirit refinement realm. For people like the Sun family's old ancestor, he could destroy them with a wave of his hand. But his own realm was still the real pellet state. So he still had to comprehend the heaven and earth. To reach the true fire spirit refinement realm, this was not something that could be achieved by hard work. It also required opportunities and comprehension. At this time, hearing Mu Zi's voice coming from outside, Chu Xiu also immediately ended his seclusion and walked out. There should be news from Duanmu Qianshan. Chapter 857. Is there news from your adoptive father? Chu Xiu asked directly. Mu Zi nodded and said, "Butian Nan is out. Adoptive father can contact us at this time. With that said, Mu Ziyi directly brought Chu Xiu to her room. Mu Ziyi's room wasn't decorated as exquisitely as other women's. Instead, it was very simple. Aside from the rows of elixirs in the cabinet, there was also a list of tasks and techniques. Mu Ziyi took out a formation plate with some complicated mechanisms on it. This is the Mother and Child Dragon and Phoenix 1,000 Miles Image Formation Plate, refined by the Black Tortoise sect. It is said that it was refined from a strange insect. This kind of strange insect is born with a female and a male. No matter how far apart they are, they can still find each other. However, this kind of strange insect seems to be completely extinct now. This pair of formation plates was found by Uncle Han and Uncle Song when they were carrying out a task. They gave it to adoptive father. As Mu Ziyi fiddled with it, the formation lit up, and an old man in white appeared in the light. The old man's hair and beard were all white, and he wore a Confucian robe. His facial features were kind and refined, making him look like an old man who taught in an institute. Who could ever have guessed that someone like that would be the second head of the Azure Dragon Society? In fact, the fact that the Azure Dragon Society had grown to such a large scale had a lot to do with him. Official Chu, I have heard a lot about you. Duanmu Qianshan smiled and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu also cupped his hands and said, I should be the one who has heard a lot about you. For the Blue Dragon Society to have such a scale, I admire not Butiannan, but you, Senior Duanmu. Duanmu Qianshan shook his head with a wry smile and said, but it is also because of me that the Blue Dragon Society has reached this point. I approved of Butiannan becoming the second dragon head. But now it seems that he is more suitable to be an assassin than to lead the Blue Dragon Society. This is a big mistake. At this point, Duanmu Qianshan's expression became solemn, and he said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, Darren Chu, time is of the essence, so this old man will not keep you in suspense. Regarding the matter of Butiannan, my attitude is the same as Darren Chu, and that is to kill. I want to kill Butiannan not because he deprived me of my power. In fact, if he could manage the Blue Dragon Society well, I would have wanted to retire a long time ago after working for the Blue Dragon Society for my whole life. However, Butiannan is a temperamental person, and the entire Blue Dragon Society has been heading in the wrong direction under his leadership. In addition, he easily believed the slanderous words of villains, and acted wantonly in the Blue Dragon Society. The wealth that the Blue Dragon Society has accumulated over the years is no longer enough for Butiannan. Therefore, I am willing to cooperate with Official Chu to get rid of Butiannan. Chu Xiu nodded. He was waiting for Duanmu Qianshan to say this. Butiannan was not the Sun or Lu family's ancestor. He was a ruthless person who dared to go against the Great Light Temple's Su Yun, and he was even in the top 10 of the honor list. Even though Chu Xiu's strength had greatly improved, it would not be easy to kill him. However, if Duanmu Qianshan cooperated and attacked from both sides, it would be much easier. However, at this moment, Duanmu Qianshan said, However, I have another condition, and I hope that Official Chu can agree to it. Oh, what condition? Enter my Blue Dragon Society and become the new Chief Dragon. Duanmu Qianshan's words were shocking, and even Mu Ziyi was shocked. This was because Duanmu Qianshan had never mentioned this to her before. Chu Xiu squinted at Duanmu Qianshan. To be honest, he was at ease with Mu Ziyi, but he had never been at ease with Duanmu Qianshan. Don't be fooled by this old man's kind face, he was just like an old teacher. However, he was an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society. To be able to become the second dragon, how many lives had he taken? Moreover, it was this old man in front of him. When he could become the chief dragon, he gave up his position and supported Butiannan. It could be said that everything in the Blue Dragon Society was created by him. Butiannan, who only knew how to kill people and cause trouble, couldn't have done these things. This old man was definitely a ruthless person, but now he wanted to give the Blue Dragon Society to Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu happily agreed, then he would be a real idiot. Knocking on the table, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, Senior Duanmu, are you joking? You and I spent so much effort to kill Butiannan, but in the end, you want to give the Blue Dragon Society to an outsider like me. What are you after? In the entire Blue Dragon Society, whether it is the headquarters or the 36 Big Dipper divisions. Half of them respect you. As long as you kill Butiannan, you will become the chief dragon. Aside from a few die-hard supporters of Butiannan, who in the entire Blue Dragon Society will not be convinced. Why do you still want to give the Blue Dragon Society to me? Duanmu Qianshan sighed, shook his head, and said, Official Chu is wrong. I don't want to give the Blue Dragon Society to you. But I want you to become the chief dragon to guarantee the interests of the Blue Dragon Society. Of course, you can also understand it as the Blue Dragon Society joining hands with you. You can use the power of the Blue Dragon Society, but you have to guarantee the interests of the Blue Dragon Society first. That's right, Official Chu. What do you think of the Blue Dragon Society now? What will the future hold? Chu Xiu thought for a moment and said, Not much. Senior Duanmu, you did a good job before. The Blue Dragon Society is just a sword in the hands of the people of the martial world. As long as there are killings and hatred in the martial world, the Blue Dragon Society will have its value. In fact, the more killings there are, the stronger the Blue Dragon Society will become. But now, it is different. The Blue Dragon Society is mixed with too much karma. A sword mixed with so much karma is no longer useful. Even if we kill Butiannan now, the karma has already been formed. It will not be easy to get rid of it completely. Duanmu Qianshan sighed and said, That's right. Official Chu, you see it very clearly. The cycle of karma and retribution. Many people in the martial world know this, but no one can avoid it. Even if Butiannan dies, the karma that my Blue Dragon Society has formed will be repaid by the remaining people. Therefore, I handed the Blue Dragon Society to you, Official Chu. I want to borrow Official Chu's hand to block this karma and help the future of the Blue Dragon Society. Duanmu Qianshan pointed at himself and smiled bitterly. I am already old and can't fight anymore. Back then, I gave the position of First Dragon Head to Butiannan, because he will be stronger than me in the future. I misjudged him once, but I believe that I will not misjudge him a second time. Now Official Chu, you are already stronger than I. In the entire martial world, the only person who can bear the karma for the Blue Dragon Society, and is willing to do so is you, Official Chu. Strictly speaking, Official Chu, you are also from the Blue Dragon Society. If you take over the position of First Dragon Head, the impact on the people below will be smaller. Chu Xiu smiled faintly and said, Senior Duanmu, how do you know that I am willing? Duanmu Qianshan said in a deep voice, Because the Blue Dragon Society is qualified and strong enough to give Official Chu enough strength and influence. Although the current Blue Dragon Society cannot be compared to the sects that stand at the peak of the martial world, as the head of the four spirits, the Blue Dragon Society is strong enough to destroy all the martial world forces that are one rank lower. Chu Xiu looked at Duanmu Qianshan deeply. Although this old man misjudged him once, this time, he really saw through Chu Xiu's heart. The power of the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu really wanted it. It was not because of anything else, but because the Blue Dragon Society was really strong. At present, Chu Xiu mainly had 3 groups of people under him. One of them was a martial artist from the Guanzhong torture room. Their fighting strength was average, but their ability was outstanding and suitable for defending. The other group was given to him by Wei Shiya. They were some of the younger martial artists from the Hidden Devil clan. These martial artists were not weak and had great potential. However, their personalities were different, so it was not easy to control them. The last group was the first group that followed him. They were martial artists from the Heavenly Sin branch of the Blue Dragon Society. These people were the most useful. They were all elite assassins from the Heavenly Sin branch. They were strong, ruthless, and obedient. They were simply the best killing machines. If a person from the Heavenly Sin branch had this kind of power, then if Chu Xiu took in the entire Blue Dragon Society, the power would be unimaginable. However, Chu Xiu did not agree immediately. He only said indifferently, Senior Duanmu, Butiannan is very afraid of you now. Aren't you afraid that I will also be afraid of you when I take over the position of First Dragon Head? You have to know that it is a very serious matter to have one's achievements overshadow the leader. Duanmu Qianshan shook his head and said, Of course not. Official Chu, if you were really such a person, the Zhenwu Hall would not have developed to such a scale. Moreover, official Chu, even if you are afraid of me, it is not a big deal. Because at this stage, only I can help you, official Chu. If Butianen really dies, official Chu, you can only rely on Ai's prestige to control the entire Blue Dragon Society. Furthermore, this old man doesn't have much longer to live. By the time this old man dies, Lord Chu's prestige will already be set. Moreover, I does not have any heirs or inheritors. So official Chu, you do not have to worry that someone will fight for power with you. At this point, Duanmu Qianshan glanced at the silent Mu Zi and said, if you want to talk about inheritors, this girl can be considered one. However, my silly daughter listens to Sir Chu's every word. Sir Chu's words are more effective than mine. She won't betray anyone who dares to betray you. After I dies, this silly girl will definitely be loyal to you, official Chu. At that time, Blue Dragon Society will completely belong to you, official Chu. After that, whether official Chu is willing to maintain the Blue Dragon Society or do something else, I will already be in the grave by then, so I will not be able to care so much. After Duanmu Qianshan finished speaking, Mu Zi's face was a little red. She did not expect that Duanmu Qianshan would suddenly mention her. She secretly glanced at Chu Xiu and found that Chu Xiu was in deep thought. In fact, when dealing with an old fox like Duanmu Qianshan, one must be cautious. However, Chu Xiu also found that Duanmu Qianshan was very similar to Wei Shuya. They were both old and scheming for the sake of their foundation, but not for themselves. This matter was more beneficial than harmful to Chu Xiu, at least for now. So after thinking for a moment, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, then it would be impolite for me to refuse. I also want to sit in Butiannan's position. Chapter 858. Knowing that Chu Xiu could enter the Blue Dragon Society, Mu Zi was the happiest one. It was needless to say what Chu Xiu meant to Mu Zi, and Duanmu Qianshan treated her like his own daughter. Therefore, Mu Zi had always been worried that Chu Xiu would become enemies with the Blue Dragon Society because of Butiannan. But now Chu Xiu had entered the Blue Dragon Society. Not only did they not have to be enemies, but they could also be on the same side. Because time was limited, Chu Xiu was afraid that Butiannan would suddenly return. After reaching an agreement with Duanmu Qianshan, they quickly agreed on the next plan. 3 months later was the triennial gathering of the Blue Dragon Society. At this time, the leaders of the 36 Big Dipper divisions would return to the headquarters and report on their recent missions. Originally, these things were handled by Duanmu Qianshan, but now that Duanmu Qianshan was imprisoned, these things were thrown by Butiannan to a layman like Duan Tianlang. No one knew how well he could do. Chu Xiu and Duanmu Qianshan agreed to take action at this time to get rid of Butiannan and enter the Blue Dragon Society. However, during this time, Chu Xiu could not be idle. Although he had stayed in the Blue Dragon Society before, he was just an ordinary low-level assassin. Now that Chu Xiu was going to be the leader of the Azure Dragon Society, he had to pick out a few outstanding battle achievements. That way, he would be able to answer to his subordinates. Therefore, during this time, the Assassin's Branch was temporarily under Chu Xiu's control. He could also complete a big mission as a proof of loyalty. Chu Xiu was also very curious. Wouldn't the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society take care of this matter? However, Duanmu Qianshan's answer made Chu Xiu speechless. In the past, there were indeed people in charge. The branch leader had to be personally appointed by the Great Dragon Head. Furthermore, every year they had to report everything that happened in the branch. In the end, Butiannan found it troublesome, but he was still worried about Duanmu Qianshan holding too much power, so he let the major divisions manage independently, and only reported to the higher-ups once every 3 years. This was also the reason why Duan Tianlang dared to scheme against his subordinates, when Chu Xiu was still in the Heavenly Sin branch. No one would care about it. Hearing this, Chu Xiu was also a little speechless. The Blue Dragon Society had not completely collapsed after being toyed with by Butiannan. Other than Duanmu Qianshan's patience, it could only be said that Butiannan was lucky. The world of martial arts was huge, and there were definitely times when the news did not come and go in a timely manner. But no matter how late it was, the headquarters still had to keep an eye on the news of the various branches at all times to prevent their subordinates from growing too powerful. For example, although the headquarters of the wind-sweeping building was in eastern Qi, the northern Yan branch and the West Chu branch were in contact almost all the time. Although the other sects did not communicate as frequently as the wind-sweeping building, they would not be like Butian Nan, who did not care once every 3 years and allowed his subordinates to do as they pleased. Since he had decided to act as a member of the Assassin's branch, Chu Xiu naturally had to think of another identity. In the world of martial arts, it was absolutely necessary to have a smurf. Previously, Chu Xiu had used the name Lin Yi. Naturally, he could not use it anymore, so Chu Xiu directly changed his name to Lin Xuei. When Luo Feiheng heard this name, he felt a little strange. Chu Xiu usually liked to wear black clothes, so why was he called Xuei? Chu Xiu explained that he had killed many people, so the blood was enough to dye the black clothes red. However, Luo Feiheng ridiculed him on the side. Chu Xiu was purely showing off out of habit. In terms of pretentiousness, Xuei was obviously much better than black-clothed. After looking through the missions of the Assassin's branch, Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Eastern Qi is such a big place, and the Assassin's branch only has these few missions? There is not a single one that can be taken out." It was not that Chu Xiu felt that the missions were too difficult, but that they were too simple. Since it was to prove his loyalty, he naturally had to make a name for himself. However, the strongest assassination targets in these missions were only at the unity of the world realm. For Chu Xiu, the difficulty was too low. Song Xiao smiled bitterly and said, "Official Chu, the Assassin's branch is just a branch. This is already the highest number of missions that they can receive. A mission to assassinate a martial Dao Grandmaster would definitely be sent to the headquarters. They wouldn't come to our Assassin's branch." Chu Xiu nodded and looked at Luo Feiheng. "Right, do you have any enemies? I can help you eliminate them for free. It's a rare opportunity." Luo Feiheng's eyes twitched. To be honest, although the Luo family was struggling at death's door, she really wanted to eliminate that disgusting family. However, the Luo family was the place where she was born and raised. She was not Chu Xiu, who would not be so heartless as to eliminate her own family. However, Luo Feiheng suddenly thought of something. She quickly said, "There is indeed a force that has some enmity with me, but they also have an indirect enmity with you." "What force?" "One of the 7 sects, the Longevity Sword sect." Chu Xiu thought for a moment and shook his head. "Never heard of it." Luo Feiheng said, "Back then, after you eliminated the Azure Water Sword sect, in order to seize the position of one of the 7 sects, there was quite a commotion in the martial world. In the end, the Longevity Sword sect won." The reason why the Longevity Sword sect was able to seize the position was actually related to the Hidden Sword Villa. The sect leader of the Longevity Sword sect, Fang Changsheng, and the manor lord of the Hidden Sword Villa, Cheng Tingshan, were sworn brothers. Fang Changsheng himself was supported by Cheng Tingshan, and even the divine weapon in his hand, the 36th ranked flowing fire, was given to him by Cheng Tingshan. "From what I know, you have quite a deep enmity with the Hidden Sword Villa." Back then, Cheng Tingshan was one of the people who brought the Heaven Gate Divine General to kill you. With the relationship between the two of them, if you want to deal with the Hidden Sword Villa in the future, the entire Longevity Sword sect will stand with the Hidden Sword Villa. Now that you have dealt with them, it can be considered as taking the initiative to gain the upper hand. Of course, this Longevity Sword sect is also very detestable. Do they really think that they can be so arrogant just because they are one of the 7 sects and 8 schools? Previously, they even dared to touch the people of my 9 divisions. If it wasn't for Dean Xiao telling me to calm down, this old lady would definitely not let them off. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "All right then, the first battle shall be against the Longevity Sword sect." At this moment, Luo Feiheng spoke again. "All right, there is one more thing. Your Heavenly Law War case has been forged. You can go and collect it now." Chu Xiu was slightly startled. So fast? Normally, forging a divine weapon would take a month, and some would take a few years. As a blacksmith master, it was possible for Mo Yezi to forge a divine weapon in a month. However, Chu Xiu had seen the blueprints of the Heavenly Law War case. There were many complicated mechanisms, and it didn't seem like it could be forged in a short period of time. Luo Feiheng said, "I also don't know what happened, but Godfather said that although the weapon was forged, There was a problem and he needed to inform you. Chu Xiu nodded and followed Luo Feiheng to the Mirror Lake Villa. At this time, it was not convenient for Chu Xiu to show his original appearance, so he directly put on the Blue Dragon Society mask and black iron conical hat. He put on a blood-red robe and followed Luo Feiheng to the Mirror Lake Villa at night. When Mo Yezi first saw Chu Xiu, he wasn't surprised. He was a veteran in the pugilistic world. Although he had only been forging for many years and didn't participate in the pugilistic world's disputes, he had experienced many things. Resurrection might seem mysterious to others, but it wasn't impossible. Therefore, Mo Yezi didn't say much and directly took out the Heavenly Law War case. It was a silver-white iron case that was 3 feet long. There were countless runes engraved on it, and it didn't look ordinary. Mo Yezi said, "Chu, you can give it a try." Chu Xiu nodded and channeled a strand of vital energy into the Heaven's Way war case. In an instant, he sensed that the weapon spirit in the Heaven's Way war case was responding to him. At the next moment, a series of crisp mechanical sounds rang out, and the Heaven's Way war case turned into a huge battle blade. Different from the demonic dance's scimitar, this huge war saber was almost as tall as a person. The blade was wide, and the handle was long and narrow. It looked very domineering. The war saber evolved from the Heavenly Law war case was called the Peerless Heavenly Saber. As Chu Xiu poured qi into it again, the Peerless Heavenly Saber turned into a long spear. According to the blueprint, it should be called the Heaven-Seeking Tyrannical Spear. Chu Xiu said doubtfully, "The Heavenly Law war case is refined very well. It's basically the same as described in the blueprint. What's the problem?" Mo Yezi shook his head and said, "This is not the peak state of the Heavenly Law war case. According to the blueprint, the Heavenly Law war case should be a supreme-grade weapon at its peak. But look at it now. The strength of the weapon transformed by the Heavenly Law war case is only between low-grade and mid-grade. It can't even reach high-grade. This kind of strength is far inferior to your demonic dance, and it can't bring out its full effect. At the end of the day, it's still a problem of materials. The materials you gave me are some extremely precious refining materials. They can be considered supreme grade. However, there's still a key material missing to forge the core of the Heavenly Law war case. I replaced it with other materials. Although I succeeded, as you can see, its strength doesn't meet the peak standard of the Heavenly Law war case. Where can I find that material?" Mo Yezi hesitated for a moment and said, "The material is called the meteoric meteorite iron. When a meteorite falls from the sky to the ground, because of its extreme speed, it burns in the heaven and earth yuan qi. Finally, with the power of the heaven and earth, it is refined into gold. Moreover, when it falls, it must fall into a cold pond in an extremely cold place. In an instant, the cold and heat alternates, and only then can the meteoric meteorite iron be created. However, although meteorites from outer space are common, it's rare for it to be refined into gold when it falls. Moreover, it's even rarer for it to fall into a cold pond. So far, the only weapon made from the meteoric meteorite iron that I know of is the 26th divine weapon in the famous sword manual, the Flowing Light Evil Moon. It's currently in the Hidden Sword Villa's collection." Chu Xiu's squinted eyes revealed a hint of coldness. The Hidden Sword Villa again. When it was time to settle the score with the Hidden Sword Villa, he would have another reason. Chapter 859. The Longevity Sword Sect wasn't actually located in Eastern Qi, but in Wei County. To be more precise, it was a new sect built on the site of the Azure Water Sword Sect. The Azure Water Sword Sect used to be the #1 sect in Wei County. With the combined strength of the entire Wei County, it was enough to support the Azure Water Sword Sect. Therefore, it was such a waste to leave such a place unattended. The Longevity Sword Sect's Fang Changxing was quite a character, and had good foresight. He immediately took a liking to this unclaimed land, and saved himself a lot of trouble. Moreover, the Azure Water Sword Sect was indeed a good place. The mountains were verdant, the water was clear, and the feng shui was good. Otherwise, the Azure Water Sword Sect's ancestors wouldn't have built the sect here. At the same time, in the Azure Water Sword Sect, in the Longevity Sword Sect, Fang Changxing looked at the surrounding pavilions and nodded in satisfaction. Feng Chongqing was a middle-aged martial artist with a dignified appearance. He wore a white robe and had a tall stature. He looked dignified without being angry and had the bearing of a sect leader. However, only he and his sworn brother, Cheng Tingshan, knew just how low Feng Chongqing's starting point was. In his early years, he was an illiterate farmer's son. His name wasn't Feng Chongqing, but Feng Shuisheng. It was only when he accidentally came into contact with the martial Tao that he stepped into the pugilistic world step by step. After decades of hard work, he finally had the foundation he had today. Outsiders said that he was just a dog raised by Cheng Tingshan. Now that he was one of the 7 sects, he still listened to the Hidden Sword Villa. It was embarrassing, but Feng Chongqing didn't care. Those people were just jealous. They wanted the support of the Hidden Sword Villa, but didn't have the chance. What right did he have to become sworn brothers with Cheng Tingshan? It was because he helped Cheng Tingshan block 3 slashes and almost had his dantian destroyed. These 3 slashes were exchanged for Cheng Tingshan's unconditional trust, the Wildfire Divine Weapon, and the foundation of the Longevity Sword Sect. Feng Chongqing called over a trusted disciple and asked, "How many sects in Wei County have yet to send their visiting cards?" The disciple hesitated for a moment before replying, 60%. Feng Chongqing couldn't help but snort. They won't give up until they see the coffin. If our Longevity Sword Sect doesn't make a move, do you really think we're pushovers? In the past, the Azure Water Sword Sect had already declined to such a state, but this group of people were still respectful. Now that my Longevity Sword Sect is here, they are still unconvinced. This is simply preposterous. Although that was what Feng Chongqing said, he also felt very helpless. In the past, the Azure Water Sword Sect was able to possess such prowess because of Lu Gongyuan's reputation. Although fame was something that couldn't be seen or touched, it was something that had to be fought for. Even though the Azure Water Sword Sect was in a weakened state and wasn't even comparable to the current Longevity Sword Sect, there weren't many in the entire Wei County that dared to provoke Lu Gongyuan. Although Feng Chongqing's Longevity Sword Sect had become one of the 7 sects, his reputation was far inferior to Lu Gongyuan's. Most of the martial arts factions in Wei County still had some conflict with the Longevity Sword Sect, a foreign martial arts faction. Right at this moment, at the foot of the Longevity Sword Sect's mountain, Chu Xiu, Mu Zi, Han Lei Songshao, and a group of assassins from the Blue Dragon Society were walking up the mountain path of the Longevity Sword Sect in broad daylight. Assassins weren't assassins. As long as they could kill someone, they could use any method. Just like Butiannan, he never used any assassination methods. Once he received a mission, he would simply kill his way over. If someone blocked his way, he would kill them all. Once he killed everyone, he would be an assassin. Although Chu Xiu didn't really approve of such behavior, in the face of absolute strength, he didn't need to use those little tricks. Looking at the surrounding scenery, Chu Xiu shook his head gently and said, "When I came to the Azure Water Sword Sect in the past, I mentioned that the feng shui of this place isn't too good." Song Xiao looked around suspiciously and said doubtfully, "The scenery here isn't too bad. Verdant hills and limpid waters." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "That time, the Azure Water Sword Sect was annihilated. Now the Longevity Sword Sect is going to be annihilated too. Is this feng shui considered good?" Song Xiao shrunk his neck. He wanted to say that it wasn't the Azure Water Sword Sect's feng shui that wasn't good. It was official Chu's feng shui that wasn't good. Whoever provoked him would be unlucky. At this moment, there were many martial artists from the other Wei County's martial arts sects on the mountain path leading to the Longevity Sword Sect. Although most of the martial arts factions in the Wei County didn't have a good impression of the Longevity Sword Sect, there were still some who were willing to join the Longevity Sword Sect. Therefore, they would occasionally come to the Longevity Sword Sect to report on certain situations and to maintain a good relationship. When they saw a group of people wearing the Blue Dragon Society's signature masks and iron conical hats ascending the mountain, this group of people immediately panicked. Nothing good would come out of being associated with the Blue Dragon Society. It was a matter of life and death. The group immediately went up the mountain and reported this matter to Feng Chongqing. Chu Xiu and the others didn't intercept them. When Chu Xiu and the others set foot on the mountain gate of the Longevity Sword Sect, Fang Changsheng and the other longevity sword sect people were already watching Chu Xiu and the others vigilantly. But Chu Xiu didn't look at them. He just looked at the scenery in front of him and sighed. Things are still the same, but people have changed. In the past, the Azure Water Sword sect could be said to be completely destroyed in the hands of Chu Xiu, especially Shen Bai. With the 10,000 swords returned to origin, if there was no Chu Xiu, Shen Bai would have stepped into the real pellet state now, which was enough to be on par with Zhong Xian, Fang Qishao, and the others. It was a pity that there were no ifs in this world. No matter how amazing you were, death was death. A dead genius was worthless. Lu Jianghe disdainfully said in the blood soul bead. Hypocrite! You were the one who destroyed them. Why are you still sighing here? Chu Xiu ignored Lu Jianghe. Fang Changsheng looked at Chu Xiu and the others vigilantly, cupped his fist and said in a deep voice, I don't know why the Blue Dragon Society came to my longevity sword sect. Chu Xiu said indifferently, Sect Master Fang is pretending to be confused. What else can the Blue Dragon Society do? Of course it is to kill. Although the longevity sword sect had already guessed it, now that Chu Xiu said it in front of them, it still made their faces change suddenly. As the head of the Four Spirits, the largest assassin organization in the underworld, the terror of the Blue Dragon Society was needless to say. Although the Blue Dragon Society was not a demonic Dao, their reputation in the underworld was as bad as the demonic Dao martial artists. After all, Fang Changsheng was also someone who had fought his way up in the underworld. He had a lot of experience, and he knew the rules of the Blue Dragon Society very well. Therefore, he didn't seem to panic. Fang Changsheng just took a deep breath and said, I am really curious. Just who could hire the Blue Dragon Society to kill me? A sect master and a martial arts grandmaster. Although I, Fang Changsheng, have made many enemies in the underworld, my enemies shouldn't be so generous. Everyone, I don't know who hired you to kill me, but I also know that the Blue Dragon Society can't reveal the name of the employer because of the rules. That said, the Azure Dragon Society only kills people for profit. I, Fang Changsheng, am willing to double the price of whatever the client offered. You guys go kill him. That way, the Azure Dragon Society will still be killing people, but you'll be earning triple the reward. Although the Blue Dragon Society also had missions to assassinate martial arts grandmasters, such missions were very rare. They were basically done by the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society. It wasn't a problem of strength, but most people couldn't afford the price. The price to assassinate a martial arts grandmaster was simply sky-high, and ordinary people couldn't afford it. On the contrary, if they could afford it, they naturally had the strength to kill themselves, and they didn't need to spend a lot of money to hire people from the Blue Dragon Society. Thus, Fang Changsheng speculated that the person who wanted to kill him must have gone all out in order to come up with a reward that barely met the standard. Although his longevity sword sect had only just been established, it still had quite a bit of wealth. Spending money to avert disaster and get rid of an enemy hidden in the dark was a good thing. However, at this time, Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Sect Master Fang, you must be joking. As people in the underworld, we pay attention to trustworthiness. As a person, we should keep our word. Although the Azure Dragon Society is an assassin organization, we still have our principles. Since I've accepted your money, I'll have to take your life. In the future, when you become a ghost, don't come to me to collect the debt. Fang Changsheng's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. Then today, must you all go to the extreme? I know the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. If you all die here today, the Blue Dragon Society won't find trouble with me, but with the employer. If you want to kill me with just a few people, I'm afraid you are underestimating the longevity sword sect. As soon as he finished speaking, Fang Changsheng directly waved his hand, and hundreds of longevity sword sect disciples immediately wielded their longswords and formed a sword formation, surrounding Chu Xiu. As the earth energy exploded, biting cold sword chi drifted, but it didn't attack Chu Xiu. Instead, it merged into Fang Changsheng's body. The reason why the longevity sword sect was able to become one of the new 7 sects and 8 schools wasn't just because of the support of the Hidden Sword Villa. All these years, Fang Changsheng had been conscientiously managing his faction, and the standard of the disciples was even stronger than the Azure Water Sword sect in the past. With the support of countless sword qi in the sword formation, Feng Changxing's sword qi soared into the sky. The long sword in his hand emitted a scorching aura, just like the explosion of a meteor from outer space. It was blinding and dazzling. This was the divine weapon that Cheng Tingshan gifted to Feng Changxing, ranked 36th in the sword spectrum, Wildfire. With a thrust of the sword, thousands of sword qi fused into his body. Feng Changxing's sword was like an immortal in the heavenly palace, descending from the sky with sword qi soaring into the sky. Immortal caresses my head. Tie my hair and receive eternal life. Chu Xiu took a step forward, and his left hand passed through the endless sword qi, and actually grabbed the divine weapon, Wildfire. His right fist blasted out, and the fist's force was like a tsunami, tearing everything in front of him apart. Black Tortoise True Technique, Mountain and Sea Fist Sutra. The sword qi shattered, the earth energy exploded, and Feng Changxing's body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Only the divine weapon, Wildfire, was still in Chu Xiu's hand. As the blood mist dissipated, the entire mountain gate fell silent. Chapter 860. In any place in the underworld, the real pellet state was considered an expert and a powerhouse. As a result, they watched a real pellet state master being punched into a cloud of blood mist. This scene was simply shocking. Glancing at the crowd around him, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Blue Dragon Society is killing people. Unrelated people, please leave. If there is any accidental injury, you can come to the Blue Dragon Society to resolve it. Well, one last thing. I am Lin Xue of the Blue Dragon Society. In the future, if there is any hatred of killing one's father or stealing one's wife, you can come to the Blue Dragon Society to resolve it. Of course, the reward must be sufficient. The result will definitely satisfy everyone." As Chu Xiu's voice fell, the surrounding people suddenly dispersed in horror. They watched as Han Lei, Song Xiao, and the others began to massacre the Longevity Sword Sect. After a quarter of an hour, the entire Longevity Sword Sect was either dead or escaped. Chu Xiu leisurely left with his men. Everyone present secretly shook their heads as they looked at the mountain gate, that was once again covered in fresh blood. A few years ago, they had witnessed the destruction of the Kanglan Sword Sect here, and now, they had witnessed the destruction of the Longevity Sword Sect. The feng shui of this place seemed to be problematic. Otherwise, how could it be destroyed twice in just a few years? As soon as the incident of the Longevity Sword Sect came out, the entire underworld was in an uproar. It wasn't that the underworld hadn't seen the annihilation of a sect before. Even sects that were stronger than the Longevity Sword Sect were annihilated. However, this time, the Longevity Sword Sect was destroyed too quickly. In less than half an hour, the Longevity Sword Sect, one of the 7 new sects, was destroyed. It was simply unbelievable. At the same time, everyone also heard that Cheng Tingshan of the Hidden Sword Villa was so angry that he smashed several teacups, wanting to avenge his sworn brother. Of course, this was mainly for outsiders to see. Even if Cheng Tingshan wanted to find someone, he had no chance. Everyone knew that the Blue Dragon Society was just a sword in the hands of the employer, but who knew the real sword user? Moreover, Cheng Tingshan didn't dare to cause trouble for the Blue Dragon Society. Lin Xue, who had appeared out of nowhere, had killed Feng Changxing with a single punch. This kind of strength was simply terrifying. Cheng Tingshan knew the ins and outs of Feng Changxing. Because of this, he could roughly estimate how terrifying this fellow called Lin Xue was. Also, the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa really couldn't afford to offend the Blue Dragon Society. They couldn't afford to offend that lunatic, Lu Tiannan. He could only express his stance. It was impossible for him to go to the Blue Dragon Society for an explanation. However, no matter what, through this battle, Lin Xue's name had completely spread throughout the underworld. Everyone was wondering where such a ruthless person had come from in the Blue Dragon Society. Of course, compared to them, the Blue Dragon Society was even more confused. Although the Blue Dragon Society was large, it wasn't so large that it couldn't recognize its own people. They had never heard of the name Lin Xue. However, when they heard that the other party was from the Heavenly Assassins branch, they fell silent. The current atmosphere in the Blue Dragon Society was very subtle. Previously, The Great Dragon Head and the Second Dragon Head were cooperating well. One was in charge of internal affairs, while the other was in charge of external affairs. The foundation of the Blue Dragon Society seemed to be flourishing with each passing day. As a result, it was unknown when the two sides became hostile. In the beginning, it was just a quarrel. In the end, it even turned into a power struggle. Now it had evolved into a direct confrontation. Even Duanmu Qianshan was imprisoned by Butian, not allowing him to take a step out of the Blue Dragon Society. The Heavenly Assassins branch was Duanmu Qianshan's trusted subordinate. Two of Duanmu Qianshan's trusted subordinates, as well as his adopted daughter, were now in the Heavenly Assassins branch. Who knew if this Lin Shui was secretly trained by Duanmu Qianshan? The Blue Dragon Society's triennial gathering was imminent. However, the leaders of the 36 Heavenly Dipper divisions had a feeling that a storm was brewing. Although these people were scattered all over the underworld, and a leader of a division already had a lot of power, in fact, what they really relied on was the Blue Dragon Society itself. With the existence of the Blue Dragon Society, they were only responsible for killing people and did not consider other aspects of the underworld. Without the halo of the Blue Dragon Society, they were afraid that they would have been annihilated countless times already. Therefore, for most of the leaders of the Blue Dragon Society and some of the assassins, they did not want the Blue Dragon Society to be in chaos. 3 months later, on the day of the Blue Dragon Society's gathering, the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society was very mysterious. At least, most people in the underworld did not know where the Blue Dragon Society was located. Even if they knew, they could not enter without permission. The origin of the Blue Dragon Society could be traced back to the top sect of the ancient times, the Four Symbols sect. In the ancient times, the Four Symbols sect was a top sect on the same level as the Three Pure Temple and High Heaven sect. However, for some reason, they did not escape the great calamity of the ancient times and were destroyed. At their peak, the Four Symbols sect had 4 main divisions. The Black Tortoise division was responsible for forging weapons, arranging formations, and refining all kinds of machinery. It was not good at fighting, but it was the most important division for logistics. The Vermilion Bird division was made up of women. They were responsible for refining medicinal pills and raising some exotic plants. Even the qi they cultivated had healing effects. Of course, compared to the Black Tortoise Hall, the Vermilion Bird Hall had some combat power. When they studied exotic flowers and herbs, they would also study some poisons and even goo insects. When it came to a real fight, their combat power was also extraordinary. As for the White Tiger division, it was violent and focused on killing. It was the main combat power of the Four Symbols sect. The Azure Dragon division was the sharp knife of the Four Symbols sect. It had the least number of people and usually did not take action. However, it was like an azure dragon hiding in the deep sea. Once it broke out of the sea, it would be shocking. Therefore, the Azure Dragon division was only responsible for dealing with difficult enemies. Once the Azure Dragon division was mobilized, it was time to fight to the death. The Blue Dragon Society was born from the Azure Dragon division of the Four Symbols sect. Like the White Tiger division, it was the strongest division of the Four Symbols sect in the past. The place where the Blue Dragon Society was located was the main relic left behind by the former Four Symbols sect. After being remodeled, it became the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society. This place was located in the mountain range between the border of Eastern Qi and Western Chu. It was surrounded by bewildering formations. Those without the key would have to break the formation by force. Otherwise, they would eventually find their way out. Therefore, even though the Blue Dragon Society was so obvious, there were only a few people who could see the true face of the Blue Dragon Society. Among the four spirits, the Blue Dragon Society and the White Tiger division were the most hostile to each other. They even hated each other to the point of fighting to the death as soon as they met. The reason was related to the current headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society. As the inheritors of the Four Symbols sect, the strongest were undoubtedly the Blue Dragon Society and the White Tiger division. They naturally wanted the ruins of the Four Symbols sect to be their headquarters. That way, they would be the head of the four spirits and the most authentic inheritors. However, it was clear that the White Tiger division failed in the end, and was chased out by the Blue Dragon Society. The hatred was thus formed. Mu Ziyi led Chu Xiu and the others around the bewildering formation a few times. Only then did the real Blue Dragon Society appear in front of Chu Xiu. What came into view was a huge palace complex, but the shape was extremely strange. The palace complex in the south was like a vermilion bird spreading its wings. Half of its body had collapsed. The palace complex in the north was like a black tortoise lying on the ground. It was the largest and was relatively well preserved. The palace complex in the west was the most damaged. It was so damaged that it couldn't even be seen clearly. That should be where the White Tiger Division was located. Only the palace complex in the east was like an azure dragon emerging from the sea. The buildings were towering and over 300 meters tall. However, Chu Xiu could clearly see that the Azure Dragon Palace should have been repaired. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to maintain such a complete appearance under the great calamity of the ancient times. It was the Blue Dragon Society's triennial gathering. There were many warriors coming and going from the Blue Dragon Society. Most of them wore the same black iron masks and bamboo hats. Apart from the patterns on the masks, it was difficult to distinguish them. When these people saw Mu Ziyi, they would stop respectfully and greet her politely as Mississippi. This respect was not directed at Mu Ziyi. Mu Ziyi had only been in the Blue Dragon Society for a few years. Of course, she couldn't accumulate this kind of prestige. They were greeting Mu Ziyi as Miss, but the one they really respected was Duanmu Qianshan. Even though Duanmu Qianshan had fallen out with Bu Tiannan, most of the branch leaders of the Blue Dragon Society were not idiots. They knew who gave the Blue Dragon Society everything. However, after seeing Chu Xiu, everyone's eyes showed a hint of surprise. Recently, there was a rumor in the pugilistic world that a ruthless person appeared in the Blue Dragon Society. He killed a martial Dao grandmaster with one move, and wiped out one of the 7 major sects in half an hour. It should be this person. However, this person seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. They definitely hadn't heard of this name in the Blue Dragon Society before. However, seeing that this person was from Duanmu Qianshan's Assassin's Branch, even if some people had doubts, they didn't ask much. Although the second dragon head had fallen out with the great dragon head, he had directly or indirectly managed the Blue Dragon Society for a lifetime. Who knew? At this moment, Duan Tianlang walked out of the Blue Dragon Society's headquarters. When he saw Mu Ziyi and the others, he walked over with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said lightly, "So it's Miss Mu. If I'm not wrong, the person beside you is Lin Shuai, who has recently become famous in the pugilistic world. However, I'm very curious. The Assassin's Branch is also one of the 36 branches of the Blue Dragon Society. Without the permission of the Great Dragon Head, who allowed him to take over the Assassin's Branch as the branch leader." Mu Ziyi said coldly, "These Great Dragon Heads have the right to manage, but who do you think you are? Who are you to interfere in my business?" Duan Tianlang's eyes flashed with anger. He wanted to say something, but he suddenly felt Lin Shuiyi's gaze fall on him. He felt a chill run down his spine, and a shiver ran down his spine. Chapter 861. Duan Tianlang was a typical villain. He bullied the weak and flattered the strong. He was sinister, ruthless, and cold-hearted. But because of this, he was very sensitive to danger. He had heard of this Lin Shuai before. He was a guy who had suddenly appeared in the Assassin's Branch and had destroyed the Longevity Sword sect in an hour. This battle record was impressive enough. He also suspected that Duanmu Qianshan had secretly nurtured him. But when Lin Shui looked at him, he felt a chill from his head to his bones. Duan Tianlang didn't even dare to say a word. He just turned around and left dejectedly. Mu Ziyi coldly snorted and said, "This person is the main culprit for the Blue Dragon Society becoming like this. If he did not bewitch the Big Dragon Head, the Big Dragon Head would not have fallen out with adoptive father so quickly, and even imprisoned him. He even wanted to bewitch the Big Dragon Head to kill adoptive father. Fortunately, adoptive father's prestige in the Blue Dragon Society is unparalleled. A group of people opposed it and finally gave up." Chu Xiu lightly said, "The main culprit? He is not qualified. The main culprit is still Bu Tiannan. Duan Tianlang is only a branch leader, but Butian-nam promoted him to the position of one of the big dragon heads. He even put him in an important position. Who else can he blame but him? As a leader, he can ignore things. But if he does not know people well, then he really deserves to die. After saying this, Chu Xiu directly went to see Duan Muqianshan with Mu Zi. After Duan Tianlang left, he went straight to Butian-nan's room. The Blue Dragon Society's triennial gathering was approaching. At this time, Butian-nan was playing with a delicate golden snake in his room. The golden snake did not look ordinary, but in Butian-nan's hand, it was like an earthworm. It shivered and did not even dare to spit out its poisonous fangs. Seeing Duan Tianlang come in, Butian-nan yawned and said, "I say, what are you doing here? Isn't the gathering going to last for a few hours?" Duan Tianlang didn't know whether he should be happy or worried about Butian-nan's reaction. Following such a boss was very insecure, but it was precisely because of Butian-nan's style that he gave him most of the power in the Blue Dragon Society. Duan Tianlang said in a deep voice, "Great Dragon Head, it's Duan Muqianshan's side that's acting strangely. Recently, a person called Lin Shui appeared in the Jianghu. He led the Assassin's branch and destroyed the Longevity Sword sect in half an hour. However, we have never heard of this person before. Only the people from the Assassin's branch seem to be familiar with him. This person must be a trusted aide that Duan Muqianshan has secretly nurtured. Duan Muqianshan actually secretly cultivated a real pellet state martial artist, but we didn't know about it. It's conceivable that this old guy has evil intentions." Great Dragon Head, in my opinion, we should seize this opportunity to kill Duan Muqianshan in front of everyone. At that time, even if someone were to object, it would be useless since he's already dead. Butian-nan snorted when he heard the words and said, "Duan Tianlang, you should take care of the things that you should care about. Don't meddle in the things that you shouldn't meddle in." After spitting out a word, Butian-nan's eyes slanted. Duan Tianlang suddenly felt an extreme killing intent wrapped around him. Even now, he couldn't figure out whether Butian-nan's killing intent really wanted to kill him, or if it was just an unconsciously released momentum. Duan Muqianshan, that old guy, doesn't have many days left to live. If he was younger and still so ignorant, I would have killed him long ago. But now, is it glorious to kill such an old man? It makes people look down on him for no reason. I don't care if he's Lin Shui or Mu Zi. I've spared his life for the sake of his conscientious assistance in the past. If he still wants to cause trouble, then don't blame me for being merciless." As soon as he finished speaking, the golden snake in Butian-nan's hand was crushed into pieces with a loud bang. When you have absolute power, no amount of conspiracies will work. That old man had better behave himself and retire peacefully in the Azure Dragon Society. He'll be the second dragon head until he dies, Bai Xiaoqun said. Duan Tianlang nodded in agreement and carefully retreated. However, he always had a bad feeling, as if something bad was about to happen. Especially that Lin Shui. This person gave him a dangerous feeling, but also a very familiar feeling. At this time, in another house in the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu finally saw Duan Muqianshan in person. Although Duan Muqianshan was currently in a state of imprisonment, he could only leave the Blue Dragon Society. His own courtyard was still very well maintained. Chu Xiu even saw some Buddhist scriptures in Duan Muqianshan's hands. They were not martial arts, but pure Buddhist scriptures. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Senior Duanmu likes Buddhist things? Could it be that you want to atone for your sins? Most of these Buddhist things are just deceiving oneself and others." Duan Muqianshan smiled and said, "Deceiving yourself and others is the right thing to do. Born in the martial world, everyone is guilty, but no one can convict you of your crime. Unrestrained, lawless, undisciplined. People who can't see clearly will easily get lost in this slaughter." In I's opinion, the most useful thing about Buddhist scriptures is to let you know that there are things in this world that are worthy of your reverence, even if these things are just something you deceive yourself and others. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "From the looks of it, a person like me should belong to the most rebellious type. I cultivate a Buddhist cultivation technique, but I have no respect or fear for the gods and Buddhas." Duan Muqianshan shook his head and said, "This is not rebellious. This proves that official Chu has a strong heart. I have heard about the happenings in the world. Official Chu, we are going to make our move today. Are you sure you can kill Butian-nan? It's not that this old man doesn't believe you, but this matter is of great importance. If Butian-nan doesn't die, then the Blue Dragon Society will certainly fall into discord. At that time, the White Tiger Hall that has been hostile to the Blue Dragon Society for thousands of years, as well as the karma that our Blue Dragon Society has sown over the years, will surely come knocking on our door. Therefore, Official Chu, please don't blame me. I must get an accurate answer. The Blue Dragon Society's current foundation was inseparable from Duanmu Qianshan's schemes all these years. Although he was the second dragon head, he was more like the third dragon head than Butian-nan. He valued everything about the Blue Dragon Society more. Chu Xiu faintly said, "The top 10 on the wind and cloud list are not easy to kill. It would be strange if I said that I have 100% chance of killing Butian-nan. However, Senior Duanmu, you only need to remember one thing. I, Chu Xiu, am a very vengeful person. As long as I want to kill someone, even if I have to endure for 10 or 100 years, I will get my revenge one day. Since I am here today, Butian-nan is someone I must kill. Senior Duanmu doesn't need to say anything. I will do my best. However, the rest is Senior Duanmu's problem. There are still many people in the Blue Dragon Society who are loyal to Butian-nan. If they escape, there will be endless troubles in the future." Duanmu Qianshan sighed and said, "Official Chu, don't worry. It is better to get the pain over with than over. Those people definitely won't be able to cause any trouble." Once Butian-nan died, the Blue Dragon Society would inevitably fall into a purge. However, if he didn't do this, then when these people betrayed the Blue Dragon Society, it would be equivalent to a split, which would lead to countless troubles. Therefore, even if Duanmu Qianshan didn't want to kill each other, he still had to do it. 6 hours later, all the leaders of the 36 Big Dipper divisions had gathered. The Blue Dragon Society's triennial gathering had officially begun. The gathering place was in the main hall of the Blue Dragon Society. The surroundings were paved with green-gray stone bricks, and the walls were decorated with dim whale oil lamps. There were also some faint radiance of magic arrays, causing the entire hall to be bathed in dim light. In addition, most of the people in the Blue Dragon Society were wearing black clothes, black conical hats, and masks, making this place seem even more evil than a gathering of the demonic path. Not only were the leaders of the 36 Big Dipper divisions present, but there were also some gold medal assassins from the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society, such as Han Lei and Song Xiao. In total, there were close to 100 people. The atmosphere in the hall was extremely heavy. Not a single person spoke. The assassins of the Blue Dragon Society didn't only have cold and silent people like Han Lei, but also talkative people like Song Xiao. However, at this time, not a single person in the hall made a sound. Obviously, these people also noticed that this gathering was different from the usual ones. A moment later, Butian-nan walked out with the other 6 dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. Duanmu Qianshan followed behind Butian-nan expressionlessly. No one knew what he was thinking. "Greetings, Big Dragon Head." Everyone present called out in unison. Butian-nan sat upright on the green dragon throne at the very top. He casually waved his hand and said, "It's like this every time. It's boring. If you have something to say, just say it." As usual, the branch leader who completes the least number of missions will be punished. Upon hearing this, everyone's expression changed. This wasn't an idea that Duanmu Qianshan came up with. Rather, it was something that Butian-nan had come up with several years ago. It was a so-called whip method. Every time there was a meeting, the branch leader who completed the least number of missions would be chosen to receive punishment. Moreover, the punishment was extremely cruel. They would have to endure the bites of several types of poisonous snakes from the Miao territory. They couldn't use their stellar energy to resist the bites, and they would only be given the antidote after an hour. With such a heavy threat present, the leaders of the Blue Dragon Society were indeed crazy to carry out the missions. However, in Duanmu Qianshan's eyes, this method was superfluous. It might even cause some negative effects. One had to know that the Blue Dragon Society itself was already the #1 assassin organization in the world. Business came to them of their own accord. They didn't lack missions at all. They only lacked people to complete the missions. Now that this rule was out, it was bound to cause the leaders of the various branches to be impatient for success. This would result in the loss of the assassins under them. They might even take on some less valuable missions to make up for the numbers and lower the standard of the Blue Dragon Society. At this time, Duanmu Qianshan stood up and said in a deep voice, "Big Dragon Head, I think that this is somewhat inappropriate. This rule should be abolished." Chapter 862. Duanmu Qianshan's sudden words made Butiannan's face darken. Butiannan really wanted to spare Duanmu Qianshan's life. Butiannan was crazy, but that didn't mean he was an idiot. He knew how powerful Duanmu Qianshan was in the Blue Dragon Society. So if he really killed Duanmu Qianshan, it would definitely cause a lot of people in the Blue Dragon Society to oppose it, even to the point of dissension. However, there was a prerequisite for this. Duanmu Qianshan had to play dead and not provoke him. Butiannan stood up abruptly and stared at Duanmu Qianshan. He said coldly, "Inappropriate? But I think it's appropriate." Duan Tianlang immediately stood up and shouted, "How dare you? Presumptuous! Duanmu Qianshan, how dare you speak to the great dragon head like this?" Seeing that Duanmu Qianshan actually jumped out to cause trouble, Duan Tianlang was even a little excited. In the entire Blue Dragon Society, Duan Tianlang wasn't afraid of anyone. The one he feared the most was the old man, Duanmu Qianshan. Duanmu Qianshan's seniority was too great, and his contributions to the Blue Dragon Society were too great. Even Butiannan was afraid of his prestige. So as long as Duanmu Qianshan was alive, no matter how much Butiannan valued him, the position of the second dragon head would never belong to him. On the contrary, as long as Duanmu Qianshan was dead and Butiannan agreed to let him be the second dragon head, the other dragon heads wouldn't be able to stop him. Duanmu Qianshan didn't bother with Duan Tianlang at all. He just looked at Butiannan and said in a deep voice, "Great dragon head, I know you want to kill me, and I also know that you've disliked this old man for a long time. But before that, do you want to hear a few words from this old man?" The other dragon heads and the branch leaders of the 36 Big Dipper divisions were all silent. They looked at the two above in shock. Previously they had only fallen out, but now they had completely fallen out. Butiannan looked at Duanmu Qianshan and said coldly, "Speak." Duanmu Qianshan sighed and said, "From the previous generation of the Blue Dragon Society, only you and I are left. You should still remember what the previous generation of the Blue Dragon Society was like. At that time, the 7 great dragon heads were ranked according to seniority, and strength was not the most important. The 7 of them were each responsible for a part of things, and they discuss with each other to check and balance each other. However, I felt that this would make the entire Blue Dragon Society's headquarters incredibly overstaffed. Only a single person would be able to maximize the efficiency of the Blue Dragon Society. However, that person isn't me. Although I have enough experience, my strength isn't enough to suppress others. Therefore, I'll let you have the position of Great Dragon Head. Only your strength can suppress the entire Blue Dragon Society." Butiannan said expressionlessly, "So what you're saying is that my position as the Great Dragon Head of the Blue Dragon Society was given to me by you. And now, you're going to take it back?" Duanmu Qianshan closed his eyes and said, "No, I don't have the strength to take it back, nor do I have the qualifications to take it back." At this point, Duanmu Qianshan suddenly opened his eyes and said loudly, "I just want to ask you, Great Dragon Head, after all these years, have I ever had the slightest intention of rebelling? Everything I've done is for the sake of the Blue Dragon Society. In the end, Great Dragon Head, you acted recklessly and didn't listen to my advice, causing the Blue Dragon Society to be stained with karma. Don't you know why the Heavenly Sin branch was destroyed 2 days ago, Great Dragon Head? In the end, you even went to the Temple of Great Light to seek revenge, which caused even deeper karma. Great Dragon Head, I still remember that when you first took over the Blue Dragon Society, although you had a strange personality, you weren't like this at that time." Butiannan said with a gloomy expression, "You ask me why I'm like this, then I'll tell you why. Because I'm the Great Dragon Head of the Blue Dragon Society. Whether the Blue Dragon Society is good or bad, it's my business alone. I'll bear the karma I've sown, I'll solve it. As long as I'm here, I won't let anything happen to the Blue Dragon Society. But I can't tolerate someone speaking louder than me in the Blue Dragon Society. Duanmu Qianshan smiled bitterly. He understood. It should be said that he was wrong from the beginning. Butianen was an extremely egoistic person, and he always had been. When Butianen was an assassin, it wasn't that no one told him to use some tactics to carry out his mission more easily and effortlessly. But Butianen never did it. Because this was someone else's method, when did he, Butianen, need anyone to teach him how to do things? It was the same now that he was the great dragon head. Whether his actions were good or bad, when did he need Duanmu Qianshan to tell him what to do? Even if what he did was wrong, he had to be wrong to the end. A person who was very persistent in certain areas had the potential to become strong, and Butianen was such a person. But obviously, for the Blue Dragon Society, this wasn't a good thing. Duanmu Qianshan let out a long sigh. Great Dragon Head, you didn't do anything wrong, but I didn't do anything wrong either. The entire Blue Dragon Society didn't do anything wrong either. It's just that you forgot one thing. And that is, the Blue Dragon Society doesn't belong to you alone, but to everyone in the Blue Dragon Society. Butianen said indifferently. Are you done? If you are, then find a way to die in a dignified manner. I'll give you a chance to choose. When the crowd heard this, their expressions changed. Everyone knew what Duanmu Qianshan had done for the Blue Dragon Society over the years. Most of the people present were even promoted by Duanmu Qianshan. Duanmu Qianshan didn't promote these people because of their relationships, but because of their strength. If Duanmu Qianshan died, the Blue Dragon Society wouldn't just lose an existence at the true fire spirit refinement realm, they would also lose their brains. Butianen valued people like Duan Tianlang. In fact, Duan Tianlang used to be the leader of the Big Dipper 36 divisions. Everyone knew who he was. What right did he have to replace Duanmu Qianshan? Therefore everyone present spoke up, telling Butianen to calm down and wait. All of you shut up. A powerful murderous intent suddenly bloomed, causing the entire hall to instantly become silent. However, at this moment, a figure in blood-red clothes calmly walked out from the murderous intent. As he walked, he said indifferently, Butianen, you are a top-notch assassin and a top-notch warrior, but you are not suitable to be the leader of the Blue Dragon Society. Senior Duanmu is right. The Blue Dragon Society isn't just your Blue Dragon Society. If you can't do this position well, then replace it with someone else. Everyone present turned their eyes to Chu Xiu. Butianen frowned and said coldly, Who are you? Duanmu Qianshan trained you just to send you to your death? He could clearly feel that the person in front of him was only at the real pellet state, but his whole body gave Butianen an extremely uncomfortable feeling. There was even a hint of familiarity. Who am I? I'm a debt collector. Butianen, didn't you say that you will solve and bear the karma you sowed? Then now, let's settle the karma between you and me. As Chu Xiu took off the mask on his face, everyone present took a deep breath. Although more than half a year had passed, as a figure who had stirred up the underworld, who didn't recognize Chu Xiu. However, there were several dragon heads present who were very calm. Obviously, they had already known the news long ago. They were all people who would clearly stand on Duanmu Qianshan's side. Butianen looked at Chu Xiu in front of him. Even with his mental fortitude, he couldn't help but feel horrified at this time. Chu Xiu, you're not dead. Although resurrection sounded a little incredible, there were still some secret methods in the underworld that could do it. However, even if it could be done, the conditions were very harsh, and some things must be preserved. However, Butianen saw the power of that battle with his own eyes. He directly unleashed the power of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Everything was completely destroyed. Jingchan Jizong and Chu Xiu were already dead without any residue left. How did he resurrect? Of course, now was not the time to worry about this. Butianen turned his gaze to Duanmu Qianshan, and there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. Duanmu Qianshan, you actually colluded with outsiders to kill me. Duanmu Qianshan said lightly, Sir Chu Xiu is not an outsider. He was originally from my Blue Dragon Society. But it was precisely because of Big Dragon Head's decision that the headquarters neglected the management of the Big Dipper 36 divisions, allowing a despicable person like Duan Tianlang to bully and curry favor with the superior, forcing Lord Chu Xiu to leave, forcing away the #1 person of the younger generation. Big Dragon Head, you have done too many wrong things. I don't want to kill you, but for the sake of the Blue Dragon Society, I have to kill you. As soon as Duanmu Qianshan's voice fell, the entire Azure Dragon Society's main hall was enveloped in brilliant light. Dragons' roars reverberated in the air as the doors to the main hall were sealed shut, trapping everyone inside. Bu Tiannan looked at Duan Tianlang fiercely. What's going on? Something like the sex protective array must be in the hands of one's confidants. In the past, the key to the sex protective array was held by Duanmu Qianshan, but now it was taken away by Bu Tiannan and given to Duan Tianlang. Duan Tianlang said with a flustered face, I don't know either. The key is in my hands. Without the key, how did they activate the array? Duanmu Qianshan said lightly, How many years have you been in charge of the affairs of the Blue Dragon Society? I have been in charge for my whole life. Who said that the sex protective array can't be activated without the array? Bu Tiannan turned his gaze to the remaining 4 dragon heads. These 4 people were the top killers of the real pellet state. In the Blue Dragon Society, their status was second only to Duanmu Qianshan and Bu Tiannan. Are you all going to betray me too? Among the 4, 3 of them stood firmly beside Duanmu Qianshan. Only one person was at a loss and seemed to have not recovered from this shock. One of them sighed and said, Big Dragon Head, it's not that we want to betray you, but if the Blue Dragon Society continues to develop like this, something big will happen sooner or later. After all, we are also members of the Blue Dragon Society. I really can't bear to see the Blue Dragon Society collapse like this. Bu Tiannan sneered, looked around and said coldly, Inescapable net, ambushes from 10 sides, so many preparations. It seems that you really intend to kill me today? Chu Xiu, you can kill the old monk Jingchan Jizang. Do you think you can continue to kill me now? As Bu Tiannan's voice fell, the murderous intent around him suddenly erupted, and there was a faint roar of the Azure Dragon. Chapter 863. Just as Bu Tiannan had said to Duan Tianlang, he knew that Duanmu Qianshan would probably stir up some trouble, and would not give up without putting up a fight. Although Chu Xiu's appearance was beyond his expectation, Bu Tiannan was not afraid. For Bu Tiannan, his way of dealing with things had always been simple and violent. No matter what kind of conspiracy they were, he would kill them all and be quiet. Dense killing intent condensed like a substance. Bu Tiannan suddenly clawed at Duanmu Qianshan, who was the closest to him. A sonic boom came in the air. The cyan dragon claw was vivid and lifelike. In an instant, it had locked all the places around Duanmu Qianshan to dodge. Although Duanmu Qianshan was old, he still had the strength to fight. A gilded dragon staff appeared in his hand, and he smashed it at Bu Tiannan's claw. With a loud bang, an extreme wave broke out, causing the surrounding people to dodge in a hurry. Chu Xiu also did not expect that Duanmu Qianshan, an old man who looked gentle and refined, would have such a firm and fierce martial path. Especially those who chose to use a staff as a weapon, their martial arts were big and fierce. It seemed that when Duanmu Qianshan was young, he was also very violent. After just one move, Duanmu Qianshan was directly blown away by Bu Tiannan. His hand holding the gilded dragon staff began to tremble slightly. Duanmu Qianshan smiled bitterly. He was old and had not fought for many years. His current strength was not even half of his peak. In other words, even when he was at his peak, he was no match for Bu Tiannan. This was also the reason why he gave the position of Chief Dragon to Bu Tiannan even though he had more experience and prestige than Bu Tiannan. It was because he believed that Bu Tiannan's strength could bring enough benefits to the Azure Dragon Society. Unexpectedly, he did not see any benefits, but trouble kept coming. As Bu Tiannan made his move, Chu Xiu also took a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Bu Tiannan and punched him. His momentum was like a raging river, and the rising fist intent pressed forward. Mountain and sea fist scripture. Bu Tiannan turned around and also punched. The killing intent was so strong that it almost overflowed. It was like a sharp blade, tearing everything apart. The two fists collided, and the power of both exploded. The entire hall was filled with the brilliance of the array. Obviously, the power of these two people had threatened the array in the Hall of the Blue Dragon Society. Originally, Butianen thought that no matter how strong Chu Xiu was, he was only at the real pellet state, and fighting head-on was purely courting death. However, who would have thought that this punch would cause both sides to take several steps back? In terms of pure strength, the two sides were actually evenly matched. Looking at the thin layer of golden and silver flames around Chu Xiu's body, Butianen narrowed his eyes and said, "Refining your body with true fire? You took the same path as Chenqing Di." After the end of the 6 illusory realms, apart from the matter of Chu Xiu and Jingchan Jizong perishing together, Emperor Chenqing also shocked the pugilistic world. Of course, after that, some people also tried to use internal power and true fire to refine their bodies, but they found that it was useless. Of course, after that, there were also people who tried to temper their bodies with inner force and true fire. However, they found that it was useless. Of course, after that, some people tried to refine their bodies with internal power and true fire, but they finally found that it was useless. Refining one's body with true fire was different from refining one's spirit. The latter only required one to accumulate one's comprehension of heaven and earth, and could be completed in a short period of time. The former, on the other hand, required a long period of time to use the true fire to temper the body, all the way until every strand of flesh and every meridian in the body was like a divine weapon. This kind of pain needed to be endured for more than 10 years or even decades. It was not something that ordinary people could endure at all. Besides, even if you could endure it, could you accurately control the true fire to refine every strand of flesh and blood in your body in this kind of pain? Once something went wrong, you would be hurt. And even if you could do both, in a few decades, people with good perception would have already stepped into the realm of true fire and spirit refinement. Why bother to take such a difficult path? So in the current Jianghu, only Chenqing Di was taking this path. Only Chu Xiu took advantage of the opportunity of reconstructing his body to complete the journey that others would take decades to complete in a short period of time. Butianen was surprised that Chu Xiu could reach this step, but then he sneered and said, "So what if you have refined your body with true fire? If Chenqing Di came in person, I might be afraid. But even if you have refined your body with true fire, you are not Chenqing Di." Behind Butianen, a cyan light was flowing, and a powerful and majestic aura was like that of a fierce beast. A lifelike azure dragon Dharma power hovered behind him, as if the azure dragon, an ancient divine beast, had descended. The azure dragon materialization did not directly attack Chu Xiu and Duanmu Qianshan. Instead, it attached itself to Butianen's body. In an instant, Butianen's aura became extremely fierce. The cyan azure dragon Gang Qi condensed around his body, vaguely looking like a dragon's claws and tail. Even his eyes turned golden, like the pupils of a snake. Chu Xiu had seen this kind of change in Yi Tianxia, the guy who refined the inner elixir of the blood dragon. What was going on with Butianen? Duanmu Qianshan came over and whispered, "Be careful. Butianen once obtained a drop of ancient azure dragon blood. Of course, no one can be sure whether it was the blood of the azure dragon or the blood of a powerful flood dragon. But this thing did cause some changes in his cultivation method with the Blue Dragon Society. Once he enters this state of dragon transformation, not only does his strength skyrocket, but his personality also becomes extremely crazy, bloodthirsty, and belligerent. I even suspect that this change in his personality has something to do with the blood of the azure dragon." As Duanmu Qianshan's voice fell, Butianen had already rushed toward Chu Xiu and Duanmu Qianshan. With a casual grab, the cyan Gang Qi condensed into a lifelike green dragon crescent moon blade. The blade was the color of blood condensed from murderous intent. It had to be said that in this state, Butianen's control of his power was almost condensed to the extreme. The ability to condense qi into something was generally possible for any warrior who could externalize Gang Qi. The only difference was how much you could do it. For example, if it was the same sword qi, The sword qi released by a warrior who had just reached the level of externalizing gang qi was not called sword qi at all. It could only be called a force. The stronger one's strength was, the more realistic and powerful the gang qi that could be condensed would be. On the green dragon crescent moon blade condensed by Butian-nan, the gang qi had even condensed to an unimaginable level. When the blade fell, the space in front of him seemed to be torn apart by him. The Heavenly Law War Case appeared in Chu Xiu's hand. With a shake of his hand, the Heavenly Law War Case turned into a huge saber. The unique saber technique of the Black Tortoise True Technique was displayed. The power of the saber was unstoppable. However, when fighting with Butian-nan, Chu Xiu was forced to retreat step by step. This was a complete suppression of power, and no saber technique could make up for it. Especially now that Butian-nan had entered this state of dragon transformation. Although he had fallen into a certain degree of madness, and even the saber technique he used could not be called a saber technique, each of his moves had reached the limit of his own combat strength. He had exerted his strength to the extreme and accurately chopped at the weakest part of each of Chu Xiu's saber techniques. Butian-nan could be said to be the strongest existence that Chu Xiu had encountered so far. The strength of the top 10 on the list was not just for show, but for killing. Although the old monk Jingchan Jizong was also very strong, he could not compare with Butian-nan. The difference in power between the two was like heaven and earth. Duanmu Qianshan took advantage of the time when Butian-nan was madly attacking Chu Xiu. The golden coiling dragon staff in his hand blossomed with an extremely dazzling radiance. It was as if the sun was falling down with a loud bang. Duanmu Qianshan had stimulated his current strength to the peak of this strike, which was not much different from when he was young. However, Butian-nan's figure moved. The divine dragon tail whip, and the cyan dragon tail made of gang qi instantly grew to more than 10 meters. It directly whipped Duanmu Qianshan and his staff away. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chu Xiu slashed out with the sea-cleaving blade in his hand. The blade momentum was like a raging wave, tearing everything in front of it apart. The powerful blade momentum even seemed to have completely divided the hall, causing the other disciples of the Blue Dragon Society to immediately dodge to the side. The power of the sea-cleaving blade seemed to have exerted Chu Xiu's current strength to the extreme. As the blade slashed down, Butian-nan's figure was blasted back a few steps. His crescent blade, which was completely condensed from Azure Dragon Gang Qi, also showed traces of cracks. However, after this slash, Chu Xiu's hands that were holding the blade also trembled slightly. On the heavenly blade formed by the Heavenly War Case, some of the mechanisms were even a little shaken by the power of the recoil, making a metallic screech. Chu Xiu sighed. He finally understood what Mo Yezi meant when he said that the Heavenly War Case was flawed. No matter what kind of weapon it was or what kind of strange power it had, the most important thing about a weapon was that it had to be sturdy and sharp. It could withstand great power and cause enough damage. The Heavenly War Case was currently changing, but its power was insufficient. It was still at a disadvantage in this kind of head-on collision. However, Duanmu Qianshan's all-out attack had finally created an opportunity for him. Chu Xiu would not give up so easily. The Heavenly War Case in his hand transformed into a long spear. Ask the Heavens tyrannical spear. When the Ask the Heavens spear art was used, the spear momentum was like a forest, and its power was indomitable. It was even stronger than the Lu family's ancestor. In the blink of an eye, the Ask the Heavens tyrannical spear turned into the Great Change halberd. The Black Tortoise True Technique's Great Change halberd manual was used. Although it was a different concept from Lu Fengxian's unparalleled demon god halberd, it was still a martial Dao that was open and open. After several consecutive changes of martial Dao, as long as Butian-nan adapted to this martial Dao and found its weakness, Chu Xiu would immediately change his martial Dao. This was the true use of the Black Tortoise True Technique. It would make the enemy never be able to find out where the boundaries of your martial Dao were. Chapter 864. Seeing Duanmu Qianshan and Chu Xiu joining hands to suppress Butian-nan, many warriors of the Blue Dragon Society present had different expressions, but most of them were happy to see Butian-nan die. As Duanmu Qianshan said before, most of the people in the Blue Dragon Society were promoted by him, and were his confidants. Even if some of them were not, they were not blind. They knew who was doing things that were beneficial to the Blue Dragon Society. And they also knew who was destroying the foundation of the Blue Dragon Society. However, Duan Tianlang was extremely nervous at this time. Bu Tiannan's defeat was equivalent to his own death. However, at this time, the situation on the field suddenly changed. Bu Tiannan was suppressed to the extreme by Chu Xiu's Black Tortoise True technique. His eyes suddenly burst out a bloody light. His dragon body was stained with blood, and the surrounding energy instantly erupted several times. The green dragon crescent blade slashed horizontally, and the violent power drowned everything. No matter what martial arts technique Chu Xiu used, it was completely submerged by the violent power in the sky. The natural law war case in Chu Xiu's hand once again transformed into the peerless heavenly blade. As the blade slashed down, the red dust slash was displayed. The space was like a scroll, and everything was torn apart by Chu Xiu's red dust slash. However, after the scroll was torn, an even more violent blade light rushed toward Bu Tiannan. Only God knew how powerful Bu Tiannan was now. It seemed to be endless. On the other side, Duanmu Qianshan also wanted to help Bu Tiannan, but after all, he was already old and could not exert his full strength for a long time. Almost as soon as he got close to Bu Tiannan, he was blasted away. Chu Xiu desperately resisted, but at this time, Lu Jianghe suddenly said, "Boy, there is something wrong with this guy. Look at his hand. Try to get close to him with the blood shadow technique, and see where he came from." Previously, Chu Xiu's attention was focused on resisting Bu Tiannan's attack, so he did not pay attention to anything else. Only after hearing Lu Jianghe's words did he notice the other party's hand. It was impossible to say that Bu Tiannan was not affected at all by Chu Xiu's mortal world ethereal cut. At this moment, the web between his thumb and forefinger had already been torn, but what seeped out wasn't scarlet blood, but greenish gold blood. This was a little strange. Chu Xiu had never seen anyone cultivate a cultivation technique that could change the color of their blood. Chu Xiu unleashed the mountainous sea fist scripture. Amidst the endless storm of saber lights, even with the toughness of Chu Xiu's fleshly body, his arms were still sliced until they were drenched in blood. However, with the undying demon pill, those injuries could be healed almost instantly. Of course, this immortality was limited. Previously, on the battlefield between the Lu family and the Sun family, because there was an innumerable amount of blood and qi as nourishment to repair Chu Xiu's body, he was almost immortal at that time. But now there was no such condition. In order to maintain his immortality, Chu Xiu had to consume his own strength. If he was injured too much, he would not be able to withstand it. Just as Chu Xiu approached Bu Tiannan, Chu Xiu displayed the blood shadow technique. In an instant, countless blood shadows bloomed. Although most of them were completely smashed into blood mist by Bu Tiannan's casual attack, there were still a few blood shadows that approached Bu Tiannan. In an instant, Chu Xiu displayed the blood god demonic technique and absorbed a drop of Bu Tiannan's blood. The blood god demonic technique had reached the pinnacle of control over one's own blood and qi, and it was the same for anyone's blood and qi. After absorbing a drop of blood, Chu Xiu understood what was going on with Bu Tiannan. No wonder everyone in Jianghu called him a madman. No wonder Su Yin did not kill Bu Tiannan when he went to the Great Light Temple last time. Even though Bu Tiannan was much stronger than Su Yin, the fundamental reason was that they were afraid of driving Bu Tiannan crazy and creating a real evil monster. On the path of martial arts, there were many who relied on external items. Even the elixirs and other things that everyone used for their daily cultivation were considered external items. However, everyone was extremely cautious when it came to these powers that were not cultivated by themselves. Like Yi Tianxia, who swallowed and refined the inner core of the blood dragon to cultivate the demonic beast cultivation method. This was already considered extremely bold. But Bu Tiannan was different. What he did could not be considered bold, but simply crazy. In the past, he did not refine that drop of azure dragon blood. Instead, he fused with it, traced it back to its source, and let that drop of azure dragon blood assimilate himself. Simply put, Bu Tiannan actually wanted to use that drop of azure dragon blood to transform himself into a real azure dragon body. This kind of thing, Not to mention actually doing it, even thinking about it felt like a fantasy. But Butianen did it. Although he did not succeed, he did not fail. Now part of his blood, even his meridians and bones, had even been transformed into the appearance of a ferocious beast. The power of a ferocious beast came from its own world, and its strength was definitely far greater than that of a human warrior. This kind of assimilation had already been ingrained in Butiannan's bones. Although it would not appear in normal times, if he used all his strength like now, the ferocity and madness of the ferocious beast would completely take over him. At that time, Butianen would really become a monster, an uncontrollable monster. Chushio believed that Butianen should also know all this, but he still chose to cultivate like this. This guy was really a madman who would go all the way to the end. At this time, Lu Jiang he could not help but say, "Boy, if you can't do it, just retreat for the time being. It is really tricky to meet such a madman. This guy does not even care about his own life. How can you fight with him?" "Why can't I fight? If he dares to risk his life, so do I." As soon as Chushio's voice fell, he did not retreat, but instead moved forward. He displayed the Black Tortoise Divine Palm of the Black Tortoise True technique. The powerful force was like a mountain, blocking Butiannan's attack. Although it could not completely block it, with the Eternal Demon Pill, if he could not block it, he could resist it. At the same time, a large amount of blood mist burst out from Chushio's body, wrapping around Butianen. This blood mist was not used to attack. Even if Butianen casually tore a large piece of it, this blood mist was still constantly pulling the power of Butiannan's blood. The control of the demonic blood method on the power of Butiannan's blood was extremely subtle. Chushio was using his own blood to pull the power of Butiannan's blood. At present, the power of Butiannan's blood had been divided into two parts. One belonged to him, and the other belonged to the blood of the Azure Dragon. Although the two sides had merged a little, in fact, they had not completely merged. In fact, even Butianen himself did not know whether these two kinds of blood could completely merge. Therefore, under the pull of the demonic blood method, Butianen suddenly let out a muffled groan. A fierce light flashed in his eyes, and his attacks became more violent. At this time, Chushio did not care, as if he really wanted to fight Butianen to the end. The blood mist had become so thick that it condensed into a huge blood cocoon. Every time it pulsed, Butiannan's blood was pulled out. At this time, Chushio's face was as pale as a piece of paper. The Eternal Demon Pill could not withstand such a long period of consumption, and at the same time, the demonic blood method also extracted the power of his blood. Right now, he was completely fighting with Butianen to see who would be the first to give up. At this moment, Duanmu Qianshan's figure appeared behind Butianen. All the power in his body flowed into the gilded coiling dragon staff. The staff smashed down with the force of a mountain, and the entire surface of the gilded coiling dragon staff cracked. With a loud bang, the gang energy defense around Butianen was smashed. Butianen himself, along with the already cracked gilded coiling dragon staff, were directly sent flying. Duanmu Qianshan's concentrated attack finally caused a chain reaction. A stream of blood flowed from the corner of Butiannan's mouth. It was no longer green-gold blood, but bright red. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the huge blood cocoon suddenly exploded, and a large amount of blood gushed out of Butiannan's body. At the same time, the cyan gang qi around him quickly dissipated. The Azure Dragon Dharma form also gradually collapsed, and even his eyes gradually returned to normal. The Heavenly Law War case in Chushio's hand instantly transformed into the Heavenly Seeking Tyrannical Spear, and directly pierced towards Butianen. With a loud bang, the spear pierced through his chest and nailed him to the stone wall. However, at the same time that Chushio made his move, Butiannan's right hand condensed the last trace of power, turned it into a dragon claw, and directly pierced through Chushio's chest. Seeing this scene, Mu Ziyi suddenly cried out in surprise. Regardless of anything else, she was about to rush forward, but she was firmly held back by Han Lei and Song Xiao. Although the fight between the two of them seemed to have ended, the slightest fluctuation could cost their lives. "Miss, calm down. Official Chu will not die so easily. Don't forget that Official Chu's body was destroyed, But he is still alive. Sure enough, Chu Xiu, whose face was as pale as a piece of paper, pulled Bu Tiannan's hand out of his chest. Although a large amount of blood was spurting out and Chu Xiu couldn't even stand steadily, there was a force protecting his heart meridian, allowing his body to slowly heal. Bu Tiannan did not have the invincible demon pill, so he would definitely die. However, perhaps because of the demonic beast's blood, Bu Tiannan's vitality was unusually strong. Even though his heart meridian was pierced by Chu Xiu's spear, he still did not die completely. Looking at Chu Xiu, Bu Tiannan suddenly laughed. Every time he laughed, a large amount of blood gushed out of his mouth. Chu Xiu, although you killed me, you did not win. Bu Tiannan was right. Chu Xiu did kill Bu Tiannan, but if Duanmu Qianshan did not give Chu Xiu a chance at the last moment, the result of the battle would still be unknown. In a real battle of life and death, Chu Xiu indeed could not win against Bu Tiannan. But I don't need to win, I only need to kill you, even if I have to do it by hook or by crook. Although Bu Tiannan was on the verge of death, his expression and tone did not show any fear of death, nor did he show any hatred or anger towards Chu Xiu. Regardless of whether I win or lose, I only see defeat? Ha ha ha. Chu Xiu, you are shameless enough. You are more suitable for this Jianghu than I am. The Blue Dragon Society may be better in your hands than in mine, but it may also be more miserable. But I did not lose, and I did not do anything wrong. After saying the last sentence, a drop of greenish-golden blood completely exploded in Bu Tiannan's body, and at the same time his vitality was taken away. Chapter 865. Bu Tiannan was the only one among all the people that Chu Xiu had killed who he didn't hate, but he had to kill. The one that Chu Xiu really wanted to kill was actually Duan Tianlang, the villain who had schemed against him. However, just because of Duan Tianlang, Chu Xiu wanted to fight with Bu Tiannan to the death, which was actually very funny. Just as Bu Tiannan said before he died, he didn't lose and he didn't do anything wrong. He was an extremely stubborn person. Even before he died, he didn't think that he had done anything wrong. In Bu Tiannan's mind, there was no detour, no room for euphemism. There was only one way to go, and that was to go all the way to death. He accepted the task to kill people, so anyone who stood in his way must die. He became the head of the Great Dragon. No matter whether his decision was right or wrong, he would not allow anyone to refute or interfere, even if that person's decision was actually right. Duan Tianlang had become his subordinate. Even though he knew that Duan Tianlang was a bully and wasn't a good person, he would never allow Chu Xiu to kill him since he was his subordinate. It was difficult to judge a person based on right or wrong, success or failure. It could only be said that Bu Tiannan was really stubborn to the extreme. Even if he didn't die in the hands of Chu Xiu, with his character, once he provoked the most powerful person in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, he would definitely be killed. Bu Tiannan was right about one thing. Chu Xiu was more shameless than him, and he was more suitable for this Jianghu. Most of the time, to survive in this Jianghu, it was not only about who was stronger, but also about who was more shameless. At this moment, Duan Tianlang, who was standing on the side, was already sweating, and his eyes were full of fear. Bu Tiannan was dead. Bu Tiannan, who was ranked in the top 10 on the list, was killed by Chu Xiu. When Chu Xiu was alive, he had nightmares almost every day, fearing that Chu Xiu would kill him. It wasn't until Chu Xiu's death that he finally had a few days of peace. He didn't have to worry about being killed all the time. But when Chu Xiu revealed his identity just now, he still couldn't believe that Chu Xiu was still alive. How could he still be alive? Regardless of whether Duan Tianlang believed it or not, Chu Xiu had appeared in front of him. Moreover, Duan Tianlang knew that as Bu Tiannan's confidant, he knew exactly what he had been doing recently. Bullying the weak and sucking up to the strong could even be considered a good thing. He had been wantonly eliminating dissidents in the Blue Dragon Society and fighting for power. He had offended more than just one or two people. Without Bu Tiannan's protection, even without Chu Xiu's help, he would still be dead. At this moment, the outer array formation seemed to loosen a little, and the door opened once again. In an instant, a blood mist erupted around Duan Tianlang. He was extremely decisive and immediately chose to burn his blood essence to escape. However, just as he was about to escape, a crimson figure suddenly appeared beside him and brought him to Chu Xiu's side. Chu Xiu's face was still pale, and his body was even on the verge of collapse. He strangled Duan Tianlang's neck, but his hand was like an iron fist. No matter how much true qi Duan Tianlang burst out of his body, he couldn't break free. Duan Tianlang still wanted to say something, but Chu Xiu wouldn't give him the chance to speak. The next moment, Chu Xiu exerted force and broke Duan Tianlang's neck. Even before dying, Duan Tianlang's eyes showed a trace of relief. In his nightmares, this was not the first time this scene had appeared. Seeing that Chu Xiu's body was shaking slightly, Mu Zi immediately rushed up to support Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu gently waved his hand. With the undying demon pill, he didn't need to worry about his injuries. As long as he had the strength to repair them, they would recover sooner or later. Chu Xiu looked at Duanmu Qianshan. Duanmu Qianshan also sighed and said, "Kill." As soon as his voice fell, some of the martial artists present suddenly made their moves and began to massacre the martial artists of the Azure Dragon Society wantonly. Although Bu Tiannan was now dead, no one could guarantee that they didn't want to surrender. The struggle for power was cold-blooded and heartless. As long as you stood on the wrong side, there were only two outcomes: go to heaven and be rich, or go to hell and be reincarnated. Duanmu Qianshan glanced at the dragon head that had chosen to remain neutral. The dragon head suddenly trembled and hurriedly said, "Second dragon head. Although I didn't say anything before, I also couldn't stand Bu Tiannan's way of doing things. However, everyone knows Bu Tiannan's personality. Even if I say something, he won't listen." Duanmu Qianshan said indifferently, "For now, put down your identity as the fourth dragon head. We'll talk about it later." The current situation was sensitive. Duanmu Qianshan wouldn't let an indecisive person continue to be one of the 7 dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. The fourth dragon head sighed and took off his mask and bamboo hat. He stood to the side and waited for his punishment. He also knew that Duanmu Qianshan was being merciful by sparing his life at this time. Just when everyone thought that Duanmu Qianshan was going to announce that from today onward, he pointed at Chu Xiu and said in a deep voice, "From today onward, Lord Chu Xiu is the new great dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society." Apart from those who already knew the news and were Duanmu Qianshan's confidants, the others were in an uproar and started discussing. It wasn't that they wanted to oppose Chu Xiu, but this matter came too suddenly. They naturally wouldn't oppose Duanmu Qianshan becoming the great dragon head. After all, this position originally belonged to Duanmu Qianshan. Moreover, they had seen Duanmu Qianshan's contributions to the Blue Dragon Society over the years. However, to put it bluntly, Chu Xiu was still an outsider. Although he was from the Blue Dragon Society and had killed the Longevity Sword sect before, everyone was still somewhat against it. Duanmu Qianshan sighed and shook his head. "I know that this news is hard for everyone to accept for now. However, apart from Lord Chu Xiu, who else is qualified to be the great dragon head? In terms of status, Lord Chu Xiu was originally from the Blue Dragon Society. If it weren't for some despicable people secretly stirring up trouble, Lord Chu Xiu would be one of the 7 great dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. In terms of strength, everyone has seen that Lord Chu Xiu just killed Bu Tiannan. Is that not enough?" Seeing that everyone wanted to say something, Duanmu Qianshan immediately waved his hand and said, "I know what everyone wants to say. What you want to say is that I can also be the great dragon head." Duanmu Qianshan smiled bitterly and pointed at himself. "Everyone still hasn't seen my current state? I'm already old and can't fight anymore. In a battle between people of the same realm, I can only sneak attack from the side. If I fight head-on, how can I compete with the elites on the reputation list? I don't have the qualifications. Only official Chu does. That battle just now consumed at least a few years of my lifespan. If everyone really cares about this old man, then hurry up and let official Chu take the position so that I can rest in peace for a period of time." Hearing Duanmu Qianshan's words, everyone present lowered their heads and saluted. "Greetings, great dragon head." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Get up, there's no need to be so polite. Actually, I know that most of you still have doubts about me. However, it doesn't matter. Anyone who follows me, Chu Xiu, will never regret it. Chu Xiu said briefly. He glanced at Bu Tiannan's corpse and asked, "Is there a place in the Blue Dragon Society where the heads of past generations are buried?" Duanmu Qianshan hesitated for a moment before saying, "Yes, there is. The Blue Dragon Society has an independent space that was opened up by the Four Elements sect in the past. It's not too big and can't fit many things. Therefore, it's used to bury the heads of past generations of Blue Dragon Society." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Bury Bu Tiannan there as well. If he doesn't take the position of Great Dragon Head, he will definitely be a sharp sword for the Blue Dragon Society. Today's situation is only because the Blue Dragon Society put someone who isn't suitable in this position." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, everyone present had a better impression of him. Regardless of whether Chu Xiu was buying people's hearts by doing this, at least they didn't have to worry about things like settling accounts in the future if they followed a broad-minded person. At this time, Song Xiao looked at Duan Tianlang's corpse on the ground and asked, "Chu No, Great Dragon Head, what should we do with this guy?" Chu Xiu glanced at the corpse and said, "Chop him up and throw him out to feed the dogs." Song Xiao, Bu Tiannan was dead, so Chu Xiu had successfully taken over the position of Great Dragon Head. However, there were still a bunch of loose ends that needed to be dealt with. Fortunately, Duanmu Qianshan was here, so Chu Xiu threw all of these to Duanmu Qianshan. It wasn't that Chu Xiu believed in Duanmu Qianshan, but he knew that Duanmu Qianshan had no other choice but to assist him wholeheartedly. Duanmu Qianshan was already so old. After killing Bu Tiannan, he welcomed Chu Xiu. If he didn't help Chu Xiu manage the Blue Dragon Society well, where would he find someone strong enough to take over the Blue Dragon Society? Therefore, Duanmu Qianshan was also gambling. He was gambling that Chu Xiu was strong now, and would become even stronger in the future. He was so strong that he could ignore the karma of any strong enemy. Ever since the war between the righteous and demonic paths 500 years ago, the pugilistic world had been peaceful for 500 years. However, when had the pugilistic world ever been peaceful? Duanmu Qianshan saw it very clearly. In the chaotic times of the pugilistic world, you either had to be strong enough, or you had to find someone strong enough to rely on. In any case, he had placed all his bets on Chu Xiu. As for victory or defeat, it was all up to fate. From that day on, Duanmu Qianshan began to deal with these things and temporarily closed the Blue Dragon Society. He warned those who saw Chu Xiu to keep Chu Xiu's identity a secret, and began to re-establish various rules and so on. Chu Xiu also began to peacefully recuperate in the Blue Dragon Society in seclusion. Originally, when killing the Lu family's ancestor and the Sun family's ancestor, Chu Xiu was still a little unaccustomed to his own strength. This was because the Sun family's ancestor and the Lu family's ancestor were relatively weak among the true fire spirit refinement realm experts that Chu Xiu had fought before. The Sun family's ancestor was at the same level as Feng Jinwu. The Lu family's ancestor was slightly stronger, but he was only slightly stronger after going all out. Opponents at this level could no longer temper Chu Xiu's strength. However, fighting with Bu Tiannan, who was in the top 10 of the list, benefited Chu Xiu a lot. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.